Okay, hello, Jacob.
Okay, just wanted to make sure everything was working.
Yep. How are you, Amy and Alex?
Good, thank you.
Hey, Amy.
Hey, Markeith, how are you?
Hi, Judy. How you doing?
Good.
Good.
Hello, Markeith. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Very well, thank you. Oh, I'm super early here. Is this where all the interesting stuff happens?
Definitely.
Hey, Amy.
Hey, Josh, how are you?
I'm good. How are you doing?
I'm good. Did you see my email yesterday?
I did, and I've got my little gray cells working.
Thank you. Appreciate it. I've got Josh working on CDC candidates.
Oh, good.
See if I can come up with somebody interesting.
That would be great.
Well, I'm thinking about it.
Well, and especially as we're going through and we're doing the Lumo rewrite and the design guideline, engineering design manual update and things.
Right. It's especially exciting time to be there.
Yeah, and I hope we're going to do some downtown development guidelines as well at some point. So yeah, no, it's a good time to have good people on that board.
Right. Right. Well, thank you for reaching out.
Oh, you are one of my go-tos, as you know.
Yeah, I do. And you too.
Well, it's just fun. I served on the CDC years ago with Glenn Parks. Do you know him?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And we hadn't been in touch for a very long time, and he had wanted to talk to me about something on Glenn Lennox, but it was just really nice catching up with him, and he's still super engaged. He's not on boards right now, but still caring about what design looks like in the town. So
Well, that's really wonderful.
yeah, no, it's great.
It is wonderful when you've worked closely with so many different people over time. You get to realize their strengths and who is really committed to the town.
Well, we kept having these conversations like, oh, I was, talking to my neighbor so-and-so who used to be married to this person. Oh, I know them. I met them through this. And we just kept making little connections. So
Yeah.
That's one of my
Sometimes.
favorite things about living here. So,
Yes, yes. I did that the other day. We ran into somebody who'd been in graduate school with Robin.
oh, wow.
And, that
A
goes
while
back
ago.
for us at least.
No, it's all fun.
Yes, yes, it is.
How are you, Miss Heminger?
Good, been a busy day. Oh, look, Amy, Harvey's hair, she's
Woo.
looks good. I tried to curl mine and it just fell right out again. I went outside. I guess that was a mistake. But, oh well.
It's summertime in North Carolina. You can't,
Yeah.
nothing's gonna, yeah.
Amy's trying to tell me something.
Michael.
I did.
Ooh, not gonna understand that. Do you need to tell me who all has not turned in their ballots yet? I didn't get a. Oh, I lost her.
I
Does
turned in
anybody need to
mine
do a sound
I
check?
turned in mine.
Ooh,
after
well,
much confusion.
yes. Oh, she's texting me. Okay. I had a reporter who wasn't doing his own research and just kept sending more questions. I'm like, from CBS, whatever. I'm like, on the anti-dooring. And what about the fine? And what about the jail time? I mean, the fine first. I looked it back up and said, yes. Then what about the jail time? Like, I would have looked at the same time. I've been smart enough, but like, dude, I sent him the link, but he wants me to tell him.
I'm surprised that a CBS reporter would be doing that.
I think he's in a hurry, so that's all I can tell you. I don't know.
We're all in a hurry, honey.
Yeah. Welcome.
All right, well, I haven't got a text yet, but let me double check on that. Be right back.
Hey, Paris.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hello.
Hi, Markeith.
Hello. And who haven't I spoken to? Mayor, Heminger, Michael, and Jess.
You've been hearing us chatter.
Yeah, I heard you. So I knew your mic was good. I just.
Yeah. Jess, did you just send your ballot in? Because you're the one she says she's missing.
I really did. Amy Harvey had to like hold my hand through it. I promise. Hold on, I'll check.
Thank you.
I actually like can't tell what I did.
Want to give her hand signals or
Yeah,
just-
there's a lot of emails in this thread. That's all I'm going to say. Once I was like, can someone just tell me what the recommendation is? Because I can't understand it. So now I don't know what I tell her. I promise I will do it again. And she can let me know.
She's listening. Okay.
Amy, just come help me. Amy, take over my life. Help.
With a piece of paper, and then you can make check marks and hand it back.
Courier pigeons. I don't know. Okay, I'm on it. I promise. Ooh.
Hello, Chief.
Good evening, everybody.
Hi.
Hello.
Hello, Bill. Hello, Ann. Hello, Maurice.
Hello. How are you?
Hello, Madam Mary.
3 minutes.
I haven't seen you out walking, Phil, because I haven't been able to go out and walk. Every time I try to, the phone rings, and I'm like, I should just run out the door and not take the phone.
That's what you have to do. Just go.
Oh, it's so pretty out too. I was like, darn it. Just darn it. we have in-person interviews tomorrow for the MPO. We haven't seen each other for 2 years, so it's gonna be in person. It's gonna be interesting. Hello.
You'll have to wear name tags.
Yeah, probably, and masks. Hello, Camille. Hello, Paris.
Hello,
Hello, Adam. Who else? do we
Hi,
see?
Mayor. Good to
Hey,
see you.
good to see you. Where your blue glasses?
Oh, they're right beside me.
Okay.
Yeah, once I start feeling like I'm getting a headache, they'll definitely go on.
Okay. Well, when you get older, you just have to have them anyway. Blue or not, can't see anything. Except for, I forget and walk around and I don't need them for that. And then I trip on things because anyway.
Yeah, I haven't been on screen too much today, so my eyes are good.
I just sent my ballot again.
Okay. Either you get counted once, twice, or not at all. So we'll see what shakes out.
I'm hoping it's like voting where you just do it over and over again, right?
No, that's not how that works.
Got it.
Just
I've been sending my ballot, I don't know, to somebody, Sabrina, somebody, and no, I'm having a hard time. It's fine.
So the Democratic Women Mayors Association is writing a letter about the Roe versus Wade situation. And unfortunately, the way they sent it out, when you responded, you wanted to add on, it went to everybody. So all 279 emails today was driving me. I was like, stop. Could you just have sent it to one person to add your name on here? But wow.
No, that's not a reply all situation.
It wasn't, she said, I don't know how she set it up so that it went, yeah, it was not good. But well, it built camaraderie, but still. Whew.
Nope.
And we've got a skate park questions going on NCLM mayors, so I might loop you in, Adam, because I'm out of my depth at this point. I've answered 2 levels of questions, and then I'm kind of, yes, we like it. Yes, the kids like it. Yes, it gets used. But they're like, give us dimensions. I don't know. You don't want me giving you dimensions.
10 seconds.
All right. Hello, Ty. Hello, Karen.
Hello, hello.
And we're live.
All right. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the May 4th, 2022, a meeting of the Chapel Hill Town Council. We're glad to have you join us tonight. However you are joining us, we're still virtual for a little bit. So if you're online, great. If you're watching on TV, great. If you're watching later, we're happy to have you. We are going to be virtual this evening, and next week is our work session. We will still be virtual for our work session as well, but we're looking to come back in person if the numbers hold on May 18th. And we also have economic sustainability this Friday morning at 8 a.m. and it will be virtual as well. So we are learning how to adjust with that. And then I wanted to make sure if anyone was here to hear the North White Oak and Gateway project concept plans, those are not on the agenda this evening. They have been moved into June 8th. So just making sure that you know that in case those are the items you were interested in. We do have 6 items on the agenda, beginning with the manager's recommended budget, which will be followed by the consideration of the affordable housing bond funding plan. Then the conditional zoning application for projects at 307 North Roberson and 107 Johnson Street. We will have amendments to our town ordinance to regulate speed in accordance with our Vision Zero strategies, and an update of the Orange County Transit Plan. We'll also be making appointments to 3 boards at the end of the evening. Okay, and there was a little mix up with those ballots, but I think you've all gotten them straightened out now. Hopeful that they're straightened out. We'll see how that goes. And in keeping in our rules of virtual meetings, we have to have a voice roll call, please. When I call out your name, please say aye or here, whatever works for you. Mayor Pro Tem Karen Stegman.
Here.
Councilmember Jess Anderson.
Here.
Councilmember Camille Berry.
Here.
Councilmember Ty Nguyen.
Here.
Councilmember Paris Miller-Fouché.
here.
Councilmember Michael Parker.
Here.
Councilmember Amy Ryan.
Here.
Councilmember Adam Searing.
Here.
And the mayor is also here. So thank you very much. We do have 3 proclamations this evening. Very exciting. We won't be reading the entire proclamations, which is our practice. We will have excerpts, and then the entire one will be posted on social media. But up first is Historic Preservation Month, and Councilmember Ms. Ryan is going to that. We also have a video. So Ms. Ryan.
All right. Good evening, everyone. Throughout the nation, May is designated and celebrated as Preservation Month by the National Trust for Historic Preservation, a time dedicated to recognizing that historic sites and cultural landmarks take on special meaning to individuals and communities. It's also a time to shine a spotlight on the places that have helped shape Chapel Hill's rich and complex history, which dates back to our founding over 200 years ago. Within the town, there are several places of historic significance that have received national federal designations, and we have designated 3 local historic districts: Franklin Rosemary, Cameron McCauley, and Gimp-Gould. Additionally, we have recognized the distinctive character of certain other neighborhoods that are significant to the history, architecture, and culture of Chapel Hill, including Northside, Pine Knolls, and Glen Lenox, and have provided them with special protections. In doing this work, the town is committed to preserving our civil rights legacy, telling a complete story of our past, and honoring those who have spoken out on diverse issues, including the Vietnam War, environmental justice, women's rights, gay rights, and racial justice. We recognize the value of historic preservation as a way to celebrate our exceptional heritage, maintain significant places that have contributed to the historical character of the town, and create a stronger sense of community and local pride. Therefore, tonight, the Chapel Hill Town Council proclaims May 2022 as Historic Preservation Month in the town of Chapel Hill, and we urge everyone to acknowledge and celebrate the places that have shaped the town's different social, cultural, and ethnic communities.
Thank you. And we have that video, which was created by members of our Historic District Commission, and Alex has teed it up for us, please.
Hello, I'm Pam Heminger, Mayor of the town of Chapel Hill, which was established more than 200 years ago and home to the nation's first public university. Chapel Hill is proud of our rich history. Our town has 3 beautiful local historic districts and is committed to their preservation. At the same time, we recognize that owners may want to make changes to the properties within these districts that reflect the way we live today. This video is designed to give you an overview of the process for making those changes and explain your role as a steward of our community's history for current and future generations. The town's 3 local historic districts largely grew up around the university. Many of the homes are associated with university professors, including botanist Dr. William Coker, builder of the rocks, and fraternal organizations like the Secret Order of the Gimp-Gould. These neighborhoods are rich with history and stories of the people that helped build our town, our state, and our nation. The ambience and imagery of the buildings, walkways, and gardens help shape these stories and give them context. By living in one of our historic districts, you'll come to understand the importance of maintaining the physical character of these districts for generations to come.
As a homeowner in the historic district, I think I can say that something I really appreciate about it is that I know that they go to such great lengths to preserve the look of the neighborhood, the feel of the homes, so that it stays this beautiful, charming place that we love so much.
When we were going to college here at UNC, one of the things that we would see is the fact that this community was always a pristine area and that the people who lived here chose to live here because they really loved Chapel Hill. And I think that was another reason that we really wanted to be in the historic district.
I think there's not a lot of towns that go to such great lengths to preserve these areas and neighborhoods, and specifically around the downtown and these vibrant parts of Chapel Hill that we love so much. So to us, that is something that we really value about living here.
Thank you. I think we're a little off on the timing there. We'll have to get that fixed out. But what a great opportunity to put something together that can be used to help in the future. By issuing this proclamation, we also want to thank our Historic District Commission members and all the individuals and organizations who've worked to preserve the buildings, the monuments, neighborhoods, and sites that tell the stories of our past and contribute to our understanding of Chapel Hill's history and how that history has helped shape the town today. Oh, let's get Richard, hang on there.
Now I can't use my email.
There we go. For those wanting to learn more about the history of Chapel Hill, Preservation Chapel Hill, the Jackson Center, and free walking tours of Chapel Hill have history walks scheduled this month. Also, the UNC Visitor Center has a self-guided tour and a scavenger hunt. Information is available on various websites and we'll help share it out as well. So thank you for that. All right. We also have a proclamation for the Provider Appreciation Day, and Councilmember Nguyen is going to read that one for us.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. On a daily basis, daycare providers in our community and across the country nurture children of all backgrounds, providing them with opportunities for enrichment and growth. During the pandemic, like many frontline workers, they put their own health and financial stability at risk in order to meet the needs of the children and families they serve. Our future relies on the quality of the early childhood experiences provided to young children today, and therefore tonight, we proclaim May 6, 2022 to be Provider Appreciation Day in Chapel Hill and urge everyone to recognize and thank childcare providers for their important work. Woohoo!
Thank you. We actually are very fortunate in Chapel Hill to have so many amazing teachers, nannies, caregivers, and people who enrich the lives of our children. And they care for these children so that parents can do their work as well. And they certainly deserve our appreciation. So thank you for that. And last but not least, we have Police Week and National Peace Officer Memorial Day. And Ms. Berry is going to read that one for us.
Just realized I was muted. One moment. All right, good evening and thank you. Since 1962, our nation has been celebrating May 15th as National Peace Officer Memorial Day, and the calendar week it falls in as Police Week. The members of the Chapel Hill Police Department play an essential role in safeguarding the rights and freedoms of the residents of Chapel Hill and all those who work, play, study, or visit here. In gratitude to those officers who have died or been disabled while performing their duties, we proclaim Saturday, May 15th, 2022 as Peace Officer Memorial Day. And in appreciation for the dedication and service of Chief Blue and the entire police department, we proclaim May 11th through 17th, 2022 as Police Week in Chapel Hill. In so doing, we call on everyone to join us in thanking our police officers, past and present, for their service to our community, and also for their collaboration with members of the community to reimagine public safety for the future.
Thank you. I had the privilege of attending the awards ceremony last week for our public safety department and hearing the stories of the exceeding lengths that our public safety officers go to save lives, even when there are language barriers, when there are situations that are uncertain and unsafe, and even unknown when they appear on site. They really do go to extra lengths to keep people safe, to get people out of harm's way, and then they go back. And it was touching to hear about one of our police officers going back to meet with a child of a situation, and make that connection and make that child feel safe in our community. It's an important job that they do, and we're very, very grateful for all that they do. And we're also grateful to their families who support them during this time. And it was wonderful to see all the young children at the awards ceremony there, and partners and family members. But we want to say thank you for what you do. We do appreciate you, and we do know how stressful and hard your job is. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Chief, did you want to share?
I'm sorry, just very quickly. Thank you, Mayor and Council. We really appreciate your kind words, and it is an honor to serve in our community. We are hosting the countywide law enforcement memorial event at our headquarters on May 19th from 3 to 5. I'll send you all a formal invitation. We'd love to see you there. Thank you very much for having us this evening.
Thank you. A couple of announcements. It's a reminder that it is Bike Month as well. And you can find a list of events and activities and resources on the gochapelhill.org webpage. And there's a lot of different activities going on for all ages. So you've got that out there. I did already announce about our council economic sustainability meeting this Friday at 8 a.m. Virtually, and our work session next week, which will primarily be diving deeper into the budget. Are there other announcements to be shared? Ms. Miller-Fouché?
Thank you, Mayor, and good evening. I just wanted to congratulate community members on the completion of the holy month of Ramadan. And I just wanted to say Eid Mubarak to all that are celebrating. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Any other announcements? All right. Now it's time on our agenda for public comment for things that are not on our printed agenda. We also, it's time if you had a petition. We do have a couple of petitions, and I'm told they may or may not be here. They submitted their petitions in writing. Our normal custom is to receive and refer petitions to the manager and mayor to be looked at, discussed, and figured out a pathway for those petitions. But first, let's see if anyone else has anything to say, and we can come back and do those together. Is there anyone out there wishing to speak on items not on tonight's agenda?
I believe Natalie Brett was the only one.
Okay. We'll bring her over.
She's here.
Yes, okay. Natalie, do you wish to speak with us?
I think that Natalie is here for the Indigo presentation later in the council
Okay, she
meeting.
just signed up in the wrong space. That's fine. All right. Anyone else want to use the raise hand function or *9? Mr. Brogan's on there. Okay.
Hello.
Welcome.
Hi. I had initially signed up and selected that portion mainly because I didn't realize that talking about White Oak had been moved to June. And my main question, what I didn't see on the agenda was to see when it had moved on. I'm fairly new to being more involved with local government. Just went through the People's Academy, which was an awesome program, by the way. I really enjoyed it. And had just seen the news about the development proposals. Myself and my other, fellow neighbors are very concerned about the effect this would have, especially with what's happening just across the county border with Durham and the increasing housing over there, and concerned about, the state of traffic, schools, a whole bunch of issues. But we can get more into that, I guess, later as things are discussed there. But I wanted to say that as well. So
Great, thank you. Well, we'll be coming back on June 8th, so you're welcome to join us then. And hopefully it'll be in person, but you're welcome to join us then.
all right, thank you so much.
Thank you.
I'll move we receive and refer.
We have two, let me just read them out. We have two petitions. One, Paul Urban's request to remove 3 stop signs at Standish Drive located at Bluefield, St. Thomas Drive, and Elderberry. And 2, Sherrick Morrison's request to add a crosswalk at Holy Trinity Anglican Church. And it's been motioned by Ms. Anderson to receive and
Second.
refer. Second by Mr. Nguyen. Roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fouché.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you. Next on your agenda is your information items, and I'll call your attention to the 3rd quarterly fiscal year affordable housing report that is out there, and the dashboard will be updated or has been updated with the relative information. We do not have a consent agenda this evening, so I don't need to call roll call vote for that, which leads us right into the presentation of the manager's recommended budget for upcoming fiscal year 2022-2023. Welcome, Mr. Jones and Ms. Olin.
Thank you, Mayor. Good evening, everyone. I'm Maurice Jones, the town manager for Chapel Hill, and I am here before you this evening to present the town manager's recommended budget for FY 22-23. We began our formal discussions with council about the budget back in February and March of this year at the council's retreat. That conversation helped to lay the groundwork for our budget, which we believe continues to invest in the core services that our community has come to expect. This budget is a result of many months of hard work by our staff and the council, and I wanted to take a moment to thank Amy Oland, our Director of Business Management, Matt Brinkley, our Assistant Director of BMD, Mary Jane Nerdlinger, and Lauren Clark, our Deputy Town Managers, and all the department directors and staff who've helped to shape this document. I believe the council's decision on a budget is one of, if not the most important decision you'll make every year. The allocation of resources is our way of achieving the priorities established by the community, the council, and our organization, and we believe that this budget is aligned with the council's strategic goals and objectives. There is optimism for us that we've been through the worst of the pandemic, so we are now focused on how best to help our community. We're also fortunate to have the opportunity to continue building a strong future due to revenue growth and the American Rescue Plan Act. That's funding from the federal government, also known as ARPA. The federal recovery funds will support our businesses, our community, and our town facilities as we continue discussions with the council about how best to expend those funds. The town of Chapel Hill is in the business of service delivery. We offer a variety of services to our residents, businesses, and visitors in a thoughtful way, and our community appreciates those services as evidenced by the high satisfaction rating in our community-wide survey this past year. Our most valuable assets are the people who offer those services every day, and that's our town staff. And this budget continues to invest in them as we look to remain competitive in the marketplace for retaining and recruiting excellent talent. The total proposed budget is nearly $128 million for all of our funds, with the general fund accounting for roughly $76.5 million. That is an 8.9% increase from the current fiscal year. The proposed property tax is 51.9 cents. That is a half cent beyond our current rate. That half cent is being proposed to assist the transit fund as it faces increased needs in operational and capital costs. We are proposing a tiered up-market pay increase for our employees this year in an effort to continue addressing compression issues. We are proposing a 4% increase for those employees who've been with us for less than 5 years and a 5% increase for our employees who have 5 or more years experience with the town. We believe this is in line with the current market and will help to continue to make the town of Chapel Hill an attractive place to work. We will dive deeper into the investment for our council priorities, as we've mentioned later on in this presentation, and of course during the next month or so as we discuss the budget and before council approves it. So let's talk about revenue, our property taxes. That's our largest source of revenue. We are seeing a modest increase of $681,000 or 1.9% growth between our current budget and fiscal year 23. Sales tax continues to do well. The FY22 budget assumed a 2.5% increase over fiscal year 21. At the moment, we are estimating a 13.3% growth for fiscal year 22 based on actual receipts to date. Our FY23 budget assumes an additional 6% growth, which is consistent with our growth history. Other taxes, FY22 has seen a near return to pre-COVID occupancy tax collections. The FY23 budget assumes an additional $100,000 in growth in those tax revenues. Charges for services, we believe we'll see a sizable increase in our charges for services next year. Revenue received from that's received from our fees and other services that we offer around town. Licenses and permits continue to increase. Our FY22 revenues were higher than anticipated when it comes to permits. We anticipated an additional $250,000 in additional special use permit fees for this year. Grants, FY23 grants are, we believe, very consistent in our estimates as we've seen in previous years. And our appropriated fund balance, we believe, as a result of our lapsed salary savings and higher than anticipated sales tax revenues, that the town will end fiscal year 22 by once again adding to the general fund balance. That is a positive for our town, as it means we've managed our budget wisely. And once we have our year-end results, we'll come back before the council to discuss the best strategic use of those funds later this year. So here's a look at the town's property tax rate. The town's existing tax rate is 51.4 cents per $100 of assessed value. As I mentioned earlier, we are proposing a tax rate of 51.9 cents for $100 of value, which would generate new revenue for the transit fund. Each penny on the tax rate would generate $958,000 in new revenue in the proposed budget. Prior to the pandemic, the town experienced an average sales growth, tax growth of about 5.2%. As you can see on this slide here, we took a little bit of a hit in fiscal year 20, not as bad as we had anticipated because of what was going on towards the latter part of that fiscal year with the pandemic. But since then, it has exceeded our wildest expectations. 15.6% increase in fiscal year 21, in fiscal year 21, and it's estimated to grow 13.2% in fiscal year 22. For fiscal year 23, we are conservatively projecting a 6% growth rate in our sales tax. The FY23 budget uses the town's 5-year budget strategy to lay the groundwork for developing a funding plan to ramp up the town's investments in key initiatives such as environmental resiliency, infrastructure, maintenance, vehicles, human capital, affordable housing and human services, social equity, and transportation. We do anticipate spending more time on this strategy with the council this spring and later in the fall. Here are some of the top priorities for this budget. We are proposing a pay adjustment that will ensure we will remain competitive in retaining and attracting good employees. We believe this tiered approach will help with that. We have also set aside $200,000 to strategically address compression issues within the organization. We have several new positions that are responsive to our needs. A grant administrator to help us identify and secure significant grants that will help defray the cost of doing business for the town. A new position in our DEI office to help expand our equity work outside of our organization. A new planning technician position to help our planning department address the significant workload that they are facing. A plan to hire a compensation analyst in human resources to manage our compensation efforts and other duties as assigned by our HRD director. This will help ensure we remain competitive in our pay and benefits and keep us from falling into the type of hole we just pulled ourselves out of with the comp and class study. A few other priorities include an increase in our bike and pedestrian safety efforts, which include our Vision Zero initiative. We have added $20,000 to assist our arts community, $50,000 for ongoing maintenance in parks and recreation, $95,000 in new dollars, $95,000 for vehicle replacement, $200,000 to help our departments keep up with the increase in the cost of simply doing business in our world today. We've seen significant increases for software and fuel and those types of things. So we've proposed another $200,000 to help our departments pay for that inflation. We've also have about $100,000 in new funding to address cybersecurity needs with the town. Council had asked us if we could continue our ARPA discussion along with the fiscal year 23 budget process to get a better understanding of how we may want to disperse the ARPA funds compared to our annual budget. We've pulled together some draft funding options for your consideration as we move forward. I have to reinforce these are draft options based on previous discussions that we've had with the council. The funding can and will probably move around as we continue to deliberate on how best to spend these dollars, and we hear from the public as well. We will have a discussion with you about the ARPA funding next week in further depth during our work session. So as you can see, we have about $1 million for our human services needs. We are going through a process right now with our human services community partners where we've asked them to provide letters of intent that will then be reviewed, and we'll have discussions with those partners and then invite them to submit applications over the summer. We have about $2.5 million for affordable housing and homelessness initiatives, $2.5 million for parks and recreation capital projects, $1 million for increasing our bike ped and greenway infrastructure, and then we also have $1 million to address building infrastructure, $1 million for downtown revitalization, and $500,000 for digital access and inclusion, and then $500,000 for a community-based project, which would be similar to a participatory budgeting process that we will unveil later this year with our community. So let's take a moment to review our enterprise funds. Did we go through? Yes, our enterprise funds. We'll start with the transit fund. The transit fund has a 15.3% increase overall. As we mentioned, the tax rate, the increase in the tax rate will help contribute to that. We also anticipate receiving an increase in federal assistance and state assistance as well. Onto our parking fund, where we will see a significant increase in our total budget tied to the debt service associated with the East Rosemary Street deck. We issued the bonds for that in August of 21, and now the town will have the debt service payments as well. We have the funding in place to help balance that budget until the parking deck is open and new revenues are being generated for the parking fund. Housing fund is in solid shape going into next year with a flat budget. 53% of the fund for next fiscal year is covered by HUD operating subsidies. 44% of the public housing expenses are covered by tenant rents. 3% of the public housing expenses will be covered by appropriated fund balance to cover the comp and class adjustments and the fiscal year 23 raise. The FY23 recommended budget is presented as a flat budget for the stormwater fund. We are not proposing a stormwater fee increase with the stormwater fund, and at this point, the stormwater fund has a strong, healthy fund balance. In early discussions with the council in spring, some council members expressed an interest in what we would be able to do with additional funding associated with the 1 cent increase in the tax rate for the general fund. Here are just a few suggestions that we have offered that would be above what we are already proposing in the recommended base budget. So this would be additional funding for climate change, affordable housing and homelessness, bike and pedestrian improvements, increasing funding for cultural arts, an additional position in the Office of Economic Development. We could also increase our contribution to our ongoing capital needs like building maintenance, PAYGO capital and vehicle replacement. We could pay for 3 new firefighter positions that we need. And then we also have additional dollars to address some of the recommendations associated with the Reimagining Community Safety Task Force. So those are just some of the possibilities if council were to move forward with doing anything with the general fund in terms of an additional 1 cent increase there. So what's next? We have a budget work session scheduled with the council next week. We will spend time talking about the fiscal year 23 budget and the ARPA funding as well. We will have a budget public hearing on May 18th, followed by another budget work session on May 25th. We'll also have a budget work session focused on Parks and Recreation and some other items on June 1st. And our goal is to have the budget passed on June 8th. As always, folks can find out all they need to find out about our budget and our process at our website, townofchapelhill.org/budget. With that, Amy and I will take any questions that the council may have, and we'll go from there. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure there will be some questions. This is for clarifying questions right now. We will get deeper into the budget next week, as we've said. But this is the initial showing and gives you time to think about it before we get together next week to have discussions to see if we wish to make any changes. And we will hear from public along the way as well. We won't be voting, as you heard, on the budget until June 8th. So there's time to look at the different numbers, have debate, discussion, however that goes, and see where we move forward. So are there clarifying questions from council members? Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you for that presentation. Could you explain to me the different phases of the comp and class? So I know that we implemented a half year of it earlier this spring. We've got a full year of it in the budget. Then there's the 4% and 5% tiered raises. And is there another phase after that, or does that end that?
Well, at this point, what we're looking at is the $200,000 that we have put aside to strategically address compression. That is yet another step in the process. I'd hate to say how many different phases we're going to have in response to the comp and class because I don't know when some of that will end. Remember, we did have a conversation with council. There had been an interest in a recommendation that came out of the study to consider doing some sort of step plan for public safety and transit. That is something that you're starting to see in different places around the region. We anticipate pulling together a group of folks to take a look at that. That is not in our proposed budget right now, but it is something that we'll spend some time looking at over the course of the next 3 to 6, 7 months or so, and may come back to council with a discussion about that, with a recommendation on that sometime in the future. But in terms of the next steps that are part of this budget, the tiered approach to the pay increase is one next step in that process, followed by the $200,000 that we've set aside to strategically address compression issues throughout the organization.
And when will we see numbers on how much that 4 and 5% tiered increase will cost?
That is in the budget that we have sent out to the council.
So that's in there. Okay.
It is in the
Thank
budget.
you.
Yes.
Let's see. And just not to answer tonight, but as we move forward, I know that we're putting more money back into parks. Can we get some breakdown of, say, the last 5 years of how their budget? I know there was a point at which they were cut fairly significantly. Can we just get a historical idea of where we were and how close we are to getting there? And also, if you could break out, I know some of Parks is responsible for things like maintaining our street right-of-ways and sidewalks and vegetation. So not strictly speaking Parks, I kind of think of that more as a public works function. If there's any way we can break out that from recreation and park functions, that would be great. Thank you for putting planning technician in there. I know that they desperately need help, and so that's a great add. We talked about just quick comments on the ARPA. I'd like to see more on climate in there, or a way that those different line items will be addressing climate as well. I think we're a little skinny there. And in terms of digital access, I know the county is investing heavily with their ARPA funds in that realm. And I just want to make sure that we're not duplicating efforts with them going all in as they are. So thank you. Those are my comments.
Thank you.
Stegman, then Mr. Parker.
Yeah, thank you for this. Just 2 questions. First, is there a line item for the reimagining community safety, continuing to implement the recommendations?
Yes, we have $70,000 that's still left from the $100,000 that we had in this current budget. We'll carry that over. We have identified as part of the budget the DEI officer. That's a position to help with the reimagining community safety. So that'll be part of that effort as well. And then, as I mentioned, there's an additional $30,000 that we've identified if council decides they want to provide some additional funds through a 1 cent increase in the tax rate. And if council is interested in doing more there, we can certainly have that conversation.
Okay. And is the current thinking that the remainder of the RICS funding would go towards SORAD, or are there other things that under consideration that we need to talk about? Or
well, one of the things that we've proposed as part of this budget is the base budget that we've proposed is about $100,000 that could go towards addressing issues related to homelessness or affordable housing. And then with the 1 cent increase, that adds another $189,000 on top of that. That could also be an area where we could use some of that funding to help with SORAD. That is a discussion we will have with the council soon. We anticipate potentially a significant request to help with the partnership. And so we'll probably start that conversation with you all next week and talk more about what we may be able to do with that and trying to be responsive to what their needs are, because it goes beyond just that one position.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, that actually was my next question. I know last time we talked about this, we hadn't heard yet what the specific ask was. Have we gotten that information yet?
We just received some information today.
Okay.
I believe, and Ms. Anderson, I think, might be able to respond to this. I don't know if the executive committee has reviewed that yet or not. Ms. Anderson of the partnership, they have not.
Okay. So a couple more steps need to happen. Okay. Yeah, that'd be great to talk about that next week. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Parker, Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, just a few things. Actually, Ms. Stegman covered one of my questions. So in the ARPA money, there's sort of a top line of $1 million for sort of community, and then there's another 500,000 for community-based projects, which you described more as participatory budgeting. So can you talk about what the difference between those two, what those two pots are?
Sure. Yeah, the $500,000, we had that discussion with council pretty soon after we were able to receive the ARPA money. We talked about trying to do something where the community would lead a discussion about what its needs are and identify a project or several projects that we could invest in, and have that $500,000 go towards something like that. The community would actually directly recommend something to the council. And so we're still working on what that would look like, but that was one part of that ARPA funding. The other $1 million is really targeted to our community partners. We've encouraged them to work collaboratively on identifying needs and gaps within the community and to come up with potential projects that they could apply for funding to help address. And so we're receiving letters of inquiry or letters of intent from them right now. That will help honestly give us a better sense of what the needs are. And then we'll come back to council and provide you with an update on that. Probably it won't be next week because I think the applications are due on the 13th. So it'll be at our next work session after that. We'll talk to you about what those letters of intent addressed. And then we'll work on developing an application process. We have actually been working on it, but we'll have an application process over the summer for those nonprofit partners. And then we'll come back to the council in the fall to make decisions about how to move forward with dispersing those funds. Does that help?
Yeah, then very much. Thank you. And related, similar to that, there are some, big numbers, parks and rec, home, affordable housing and the ARPA money, $2.5 million for each of those, some others. Is that based on, sort of just, this is how much money we have and this seems like a reasonable allocation? Or are there specific projects underlying them that led to picking those numbers?
Well, I can tell you with Parks and Recreation, the one number that we've looked at that we know we have in hand is the $1.1 million to replace the turf fields at Cedar Falls. We have to do that soon. And so we anticipated that's 1.1. And then we heard from council over the course of the last few months an interest in several different capital projects. And so we factored in another $1.4 million to get us to about $2.5 million to try to address some of those. And we'll work with council as we're going through this process to identify what projects you as a body decide you'd like to invest in. And one of the things I will say, and I said this at the very beginning, is that these numbers are fungible. They can move depending on what council wants to do and what you hear from the public as well. So these were just suggested numbers, but the 1.1 was definitely kind of leading our thoughts on the turf fields with Parks and Recreation.
Okay, that's helpful. Thank you.
Sure.
And last for me is the way you've laid it out, sort of, you've said, well, if we want to add 1%, this is how you could spend it based on, I guess, and rather than, I'm wondering if we could look at potential additional needs in a more open-ended way. So rather than starting from a penny and then, you or someone else making some allocations, if we as a council could really, talk, many of us, I assume, have some priorities, talk about just what other things do we want in the budget and then see what the implications are for the tax rate.
Absolutely.
Rather than, sort of creating a cap that we have to stay within. I mean, it may be that it's less than a penny. I have no idea what I and my colleagues want to do, but it seems like taking that kind of approach is kind of artificially constraining.
Yeah, no, we were just trying to be responsive to the request the council had made to say, we heard from a couple of council members, well, what can you get for a penny? And so based on what we know, what we've heard from council in terms of priorities and what we know are some of the needs in our organization and the community, we provided this. But once again, like with the ARPA funding, that's fungible. And if council wants to move things around or take things out and put other things in, if that's a direction you want to go in, we certainly can do that.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Okay, I have Ms. Anderson, followed by Ms. Miller-Fushi, then Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, thank you. This is helpful. I think I'll have some more questions next week, but one thing that I think is really important, given a lot of our priorities, is getting that position for our economic development team. And so I'm just wondering if we could have maybe some options of different ways to do that. I know that there's one of the options is raising taxes, but I'm wondering if you could also provide some ways that would be like moving positions between departments or something, just giving us some options of ways to do that. I think just given our priorities and trying to really have downtown take off and doing all these various, we have a lot going on in economic development. So I think it's really, really critical to get that team a little bit of help, but I'm just wondering if we could get some kind of additional levers or ways to do that besides just the tax increase.
We can certainly look at other trade-offs for sure.
Okay, thanks.
Ms. Miller-Fushi, then Mr. Nguyen.
Great, thank you. Just wanted to make sure that I'm clear around the cultural arts. So our baseline, you're looking at 23,500 for that. And then you said an additional 20K on top of it?
Our current fiscal year is 23.5, and then our baseline budget that we've proposed, the recommended budget, is another 20,000 on top of that 23.5.
And then the other 20 would then be if we did the 1 penny on the tax rate.
Yes, I mean, or once again, as we've said, council can move things around if they wanted to do more funding in the baseline budget. Yes, ma'am.
Got it. Yeah, I just wanted to make clear. I didn't write that down in my notes, and so I just wanted some clarity around that.
Sure.
And I think that's it. Everyone else has pretty much asked the questions that I wanted to ask. Thanks.
Thank you.
Mr. Nguyen, then Mr. Searing.
Thank you. My first question, which probably will be answered next week, was if you could provide a breakdown. I know there's, downtown improvements on the additional revenues list of things. There's a lot of list of items and numbers, so I'm getting a little confused. So there's downtown improvements there. There's some downtown stuff on the ARPA, and then I think there was like a third list with downtown. If you could just kind of list out kind of specific uses, or if we don't have those, what we intend to use those funds for as it relates to downtown improvements, that would be really helpful. And same with the affordable housing and homelessness initiatives.
Sure.
I know you just mentioned you just got the numbers related to the partnerships ask and stuff, and I think IFC and some of the other organizations also put some asks, so it would be helpful to see those numbers and how they coincide with the numbers that are included in the budget and how they stack up. And then my other question was looking at the recommended budget document, the list on page 4 with the Roman numerals, where I think the subheading is like continuing the 5-year budget strategy. The vehicle replacement, DEI, grants, that list. Are the numbers in there, for example, climate action is 80,000 in there, and then within the budget there's a climate action fund that's I think 550,000. Is that 80,000 included in that 550,000?
Yes, it is, because our current budget is $470,000 in this fiscal year. That 80,000 is in addition to that, so that would make it 550.
Gotcha. So the number in the fund is the total with these lists, and I'm assuming that's the same for the housing and all these kind of other buckets as well.
That's correct.
Gotcha. All right, thank you. I think all my other questions have been asked.
Thank you.
Mr. Searing.
Just to clarify, you're proposing a 0.5 cent property tax increase to fund the transit increase, right?
That's correct.
But there's not another. That's the only increase in the property
at this point. We are not proposed. We have not, as part of this recommended budget, proposed any other tax increases.
Okay, That's why I just wanted to clarify that, because we were talking about a 1 cent is a half cent for the transit. Right?
I get it.
And then I think, I saw something today, Orange County is proposing a tax increase too, I think, in their recommended budget. But I can't remember. I think it is a penny and a half or something. But I think that'd be good information to have next time for sure when
We can certainly get that for you.
Last year, Orange County said they were going to do a 3-year in a row tax increase, anywhere from a penny and a half to 2.5 cents per year, which was a little startling for the rest of us who were trying to figure out how to, cover our budgets as well. We're already the most expensive tax district in this state, one of the most expensive. Ms. Barry, did you have any clarifying questions?
Yes, and I was just trying to make sure that I am going to repeat here, and I was trying to avoid that. It would be very helpful to have more details about how the housing and homelessness would break down, as well as the Parks and Rec. It's a little too amorphous for me, and it's probably because you need more input from us. So I'm looking forward to that discussion about those, as well as what do we need more? No, that's not a question, clarifying question. My clarifying question is, could you please provide more detail for those amounts that you have presented to us?
We certainly can do that, and anticipated doing that as part of our work session discussions. We, as Councilmember Quinn mentioned, we anticipate, we did receive a request from IFC, which will be a pretty significant increase. We anticipated we'd receive some sort of increase from the partnership, for instance, on homelessness and affordable housing. And that's one of the reasons we have proposed a couple of different pots of money that could help address some of those issues. And we'll go into detail with council about that during the work session.
And I did have one more question. The $1 million that you have designated for community partners, I'm hearing something, I'm interpreting something, and I want to clarify if this is true. Are you going to encourage the community partners to collaborate when they present a proposal? So a collaborative proposal will be received very well?
We certainly did. When we met with the council last fall, one of the things that we talked about with the council was the need for nonprofit partners to collaborate if they can on larger projects, especially. And so we have encouraged them as part of this discussion to collaborate where it makes sense for them to do so.
Okay, thank you.
Sure.
Thank you, Mayor.
Yeah. I had a few questions. The 100,000 for the downtown improvements was the request for the downtown partnership to get some money, start sort of figuring out how to make that balance happen. It'd be great if we could have the breakout of what's happening with the MSC, the Municipal Services District Tax, and what pots how much it's generating, which pots it's currently going into, just because it's kind of messy. And I think we need to figure out what we want to do with that overall philosophically, whether we move all the dollars. And I will just make sure you're all aware, I am no longer on that board. I'm a advisory person who shows up to the public meeting part. So same with Mr. Parker. So I can talk about this. We're going to meet to talk about what that money could be used for and what things the downtown partnership's looking to do. We're having that meeting tomorrow, I think. So have that. I would like to ask that the Parks and Rec team or someone from management talk to the soccer clubs before we talk again, to see they were willing to front the money on the first artificial turf fields. That way we wouldn't have to spend either that much, or, I mean, there may be they support half of it and get it back in rental fees. I had a short conversation with them. They said they were willing to consider it. So they wanted to hear more about what that would entail. So I encourage you to have that conversation before we make any decisions, because if we don't have to spend 1.1 million of ARPA on that, there may be other things we can stretch that money to do. I was over at the Rogers Road Community Center today. They're trying to get ready for summer camp. We had talked about saving some money from ARPA to help with the expansion over there. I just wanted to remind you, I wasn't sure what bucket that would fall into. In the meantime, they believe the county is sending them a modular unit to help with summer camp, but I wasn't up to, that's the first I heard of it. But they're finding it difficult. They have outgrown that facility. They have so many requests and kids and needs that they need some help over there. And then can we get an update on how much of the money for climate action activities we've already spent? I don't mean the personnel, but we've been waiting on the light bulbs at Cedar Fall. Have those gone in yet? Just an update on where we spent some of those monies, or have we? And that was a grant, a matching grant through the county. I think it's going to be great to have a grant administrator to help us find those different resources, but just to be able to know what we did with our money last year, because that's the most we've ever dedicated to climate action was last year. And just want to see if we're hitting the mark or behind it or ahead of it. I mean, I know there's a lot more we could do, don't get me wrong, but just want to see where we are. If we could get that information.
Sure.
Okay. All right, this item is open for public comment. There'll be many opportunities for the public to give input to the budget and the budget process. Council meetings is one way to do it. Sending emails and calling is another way to do it. But if anyone is wishing to make a comment or suggestion or whatever they'd like to say about the budget, we welcome that now. If you would use the raise hand function or *9 if you're by phone. Ms. Stegman, do we see anyone?
Nope.
Okay. All right, I bring it back to council members. I'll just give a plug in there. The transit group did ask for a little bit more than 0.5 cents. So I share that to let you know that, and I'm sure transit partners can weigh in a little bit better than I can on that, but just giving you a heads up, that was the base, and for the money we input, the hospital and Carver also input money. So it's a matching system, just so you're aware. All right, any final comments before we dive in next week on Wednesday? Mr. Parker?
Yeah, just a quick one. I don't know if it's a comment or a question I forgot to ask, but I was actually reviewing the MMC minutes that the mayor was kind enough to share with us earlier today. And there was some reference to collaborating on projects using ARPA money. And so I'm not sure, how that factors into some of the allocations you've made, and again, I know it's all tentative and those are all, possibilities, not, decisions. But I was just wondering, do we have or will we have a process or a telephone call to see, what possibilities are out there to leverage our money with the county or other municipalities to get maybe bigger or more interesting things?
Unfortunately, I'm sorry. The county decided they wanted to use all their ARPA funding for broadband. After we'd had that discussion, they moved in a different direction. Carver is still willing to, we did all agree that we wanted to partner on the arena expansion, but the county has made a lot of comments directing all of the ARPA funding to go to broadband.
And Mayor, I can't speak to all the county's discussions about ARPA. I've also heard that they are interested in using some of that ARPA funding to help with the issues related to homelessness as well.
Oh, good.
There's one area that I've just learned today that they are thinking about using ARPA funding for as well.
Oh, good, great. But we're still having those conversations, so they're not making any definite decisions. They're just making a lot of comments around broadband, which is understandable since Orange County's rural part of Orange County is woefully underserved. Okay, well, thank you. And we will look forward to having a deeper discussion. There will be a quiz next week, so I expect all council members to study up their charts and graphs.
Thank you, Council.
Questions. Okay, thank you very
Just know
much.
that I cheat.
No, not allowed, not allowed. All right, that brings us to item number 6. Okay, consider approving the Affordable Housing Bond Funding Plan.
At the minute
Welcome,
here,
Emily.
Thank you. I have the tall job of standing in for Nate this evening, so bear with me. Okay, if I did that right, you should be seeing my presentation, but not my notes. Is that correct?
We see your notes, sorry.
See the notes. That's
We do
okay.
see the presentation, but we also see.
Okay. How about now?
Perfect now.
All right. Good evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Emily Holt. I'm the Affordable Housing Development Officer in the Department of Affordable Housing and Community Connections. This evening, we're asking Council to consider approving the $1.35 million funding plan to support the creation of new affordable housing in town. I'm going to start by providing background on the town's affordable housing bond, how we've been implementing Council's affordable housing investment plan, specifically the first $5 million in affordable housing bond funds. I'll then share with you an overview of the funding requests we received in this round and discuss the HAB's recommended funding plan. So as a reminder, in 2018, as the council continued to explore ways to increase the town's impact on addressing the affordable housing needs of the community and support the creation of more affordable housing units, council authorized the town to pursue a $10 million affordable housing bond referendum. In November of that year, Chapel Hill voters overwhelmingly approved the bond. As part of that process, council approved 3 uses of those funds: acquisition of property, affordable home repairs, and new construction of affordable housing. In 2020, council approved use of the first half, $5 million of bond funds, along with $250,000 from the Affordable Housing Development Reserve. This slide shows you an overview of the 2020 approved funding plan to support 5 affordable housing development projects that are together anticipated to create about 280 new affordable housing units in town. You'll know from recent meetings and things you see around town that all of these have made some progress in the last 2 years. This spring, the town launched its second bond funding round. We have made $2 million available specifically for projects applying for 9% low-income housing tax credits this year. Part of the reasoning for this targeted funding round was to accommodate the requirement that 9% tax credit applications include funding commitments by the final application deadline of May 13th. Any funding award approved by council tonight would be contingent on the project receiving a tax credit award from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency in August of this year. If the project receives a town funding award but doesn't receive the 9% award, the funds would no longer be obligated to the project and they would be able to support other affordable housing projects in our next bond funding round. So we received 1 application for this round of bond funding. It's for a project located at Caraway Village called the Indigo, and it's being developed by DHIC. The Indigo is one of 3 projects in Chapel Hill that have applied for 9% low-income housing tax credits this year. The other 2, as you may know, are the town-initiated projects, J Street and Trinity Court. The Indigo is a 51-unit affordable rental project planned to serve 25% of its units for households at or below 30% of AMI, and the remainder serving no more than 60% of AMI. The project is planned to remain affordable for at least 30 years, but the applicant has stated they would plan for it to remain affordable for longer. The funding request is for $1.35 million in the form of a loan, equating to about $26,000 of subsidy per unit, and with an almost 90% of the project being leveraged from non-town sources. You can find more information on the request in the HAB recommended funding plan overview in your packet. The application from DHIC is also in your packet. The HAB used the town scoring rubric to help analyze the merit of this request, which looks at categories like feasibility of the project, who would be served by it, financing and leverage, and the impact the project would have on the community, among other things. Based on all the scoring categories, the Indigo scored an 84%, which is relatively high based on what we typically get. For context, the highest scoring project in the first affordable housing bond round was for CASA's Merritt Mill project, now known as Perry Place. It also got an 84%, and it is also a 9% tax credit project. So based on the high score of the project, which was in part driven by the AMI levels it's proposing to serve, the HAB at their April meeting recommended that council approve the full funding request of $1.35 million for the project. Any funding commitment, again, would be contingent on the project receiving 9% LIHTC in 2022. I just want to highlight a couple next steps for you. We do plan to launch the final affordable housing bond cycle in late summer of this year. This will include HAB and town council review in early fall before beginning issuance of the bonds later that fall. And then finally, this evening, we're asking council to consider approving the recommended affordable housing bond funding plan, which you can do by approving resolution R1. Thank you.
Good job, Emily. Thanks for stepping in.
Yeah.
You can bring us back to full screen. Great. Council members, do you have clarifying questions? Ms. Ryan and Mr.
Hi,
Parker?
thank you. So in the fall funding cycle, how much will that funding be? Right, you talked about 2 million and we have the Indigo asking for 1.3 million. So would the fall funding cycle be the $700,000 remaining in the 2 million? Would it be from the rest of our bond? How?
So there's half, so there should be 5 million left, minus whatever you all approve this evening. So if it's fully funded to DHIC and they do get the 9% tax credit, it'd be 5 minus the 1.35. So we didn't get applications for the full 2 million that was
for the 2 million.
available.
Okay. Okay. And then that would exhaust our currently approved affordable housing bond. If we do that. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Parker, then Ms. Stegman.
Yeah, I'm not sure I'm getting all the numbers right. So we've basically spent everything from the first 5 million. Is that correct? That's gone. So we've got 5 million that we can still draw down from bonds. This request is 1.35. So that would theoretically leave, my math isn't too bad, about 3.665 or something. Do we have any tentative commitments for that money? Are we holding some of it for potential use on one or the other or both of the other two, the town involved affordable housing projects, J Street and Trinity Court? Do we have a sense of how the full 5 will be spent, or is the only commitment at this point, this one, if the council were to approve it?
No commitments. I'll start to answer that and let Sarah finish. I think we are really trying to wait until August to see where we stand after the 9% awards are announced, because the picture could be very different if this 1.35 is available or not, and then depending on which other projects get it. And we also know that there is very high demand for this money between our projects and outside projects. So I don't think we've really gotten into strategizing, but I'll pause there.
So we're going to be, so let me get, so, and I'm not being critical or anything. I just want to make sure I understand the facts. So basically what you're saying is that we will draw down the full 5, but at most, as of today, at least, we only have, we will have only allocated 1.35 million, right? Okay.
That's correct. And we have, Councilmember Parker, I will say we have looked at a variety of different scenarios. And as Emily said, a lot hinges on the outcome of the 9% tax credit awards in August. So we've modeled a lot of different scenarios, and that was part of our thinking in doing this current RFP process limited to the 9% projects and holding the remainder to the fall. So we will, in addition to the bond funding that Emily talked about, we also will roll in the Affordable Housing Development Reserve funding. We typically do those concurrently. So that funding would also be available, which in the recommended budget is consistent with current year at $688,000. So that could also be available for projects in the same RFP process.
Okay, great. Thank you. And one other question, and this is probably an Amy Olin question. We saw today, for example, that the Fed raised interest rates by 0.5 point. And they've been very clear that they're going to keep raising the rates for several times over the next several months. And that's going to translate pretty much 1-to-1 to what our borrowing costs are. So are there any options for us to go out to borrow sooner? Because by the time, if we don't borrow till the fall, it's likely that will be, somewhere between 0.75% and 1% higher in borrowing costs than we are today. So even though, it probably could save us a bundle of money over the long haul if we could draw down, issue the bonds sooner rather than later. And I understand there are all kinds of restrictions, but.
Councilmember Parker, we can certainly look into that. As I mentioned, we weren't anticipating going to market until the fall. I'm not sure what barriers are in place, but we can certainly look into that and get back to the council.
Yeah, I mean, it is not even one doesn't need a crystal ball. I mean, the Fed has been explicit in terms of what they're planning to do. And then the last, sorry, Murray.
No, I was just going to say, I mean, I would imagine that of course it would cost more money in the long run. I would imagine it wouldn't be significant between, June and September, but would certainly, cost us a little bit more money down the road for sure.
Well, look, if we're right now looking at 2% interest to 2.5% interest, and it goes up another 0.5% or 0.75% between now and the fall, we're looking at a 20+% increase in our borrowing costs. That's not insignificant.
No, I know. I'm just saying that we may not be able to go this spring.
Yeah, if we can't, we can't.
Yeah.
And last question, could you talk a little bit, just to refresh the council's memory, particularly for folks who, were not on council at the time, what the arrangement is, since this is on land, that was, the dedication of land for affordable housing was part of the SUP and the economic incentive agreement between Caraway Village and the town. So could you just remind us what that arrangement looks like and how that fits into the financing, how that fits into the budget for the project?
Yes, and I should have said also that we have Natalie Britt here from DHIC to answer questions as well, and she might be able to elaborate more on the details. But in terms of how DHIC comes into that, but the town, so the Caraway Village's affordable housing contribution was to set aside this parcel for affordable housing development, and they had 10 years to do it. So this, I think that was in forgetting the year, but there's a few more years left. Yeah. And they've tried several times to pursue various things, including a 9% tax credit project there. And when that time expires, it will come back to the town for
$1.
$1, yeah. Now, I don't know if you want to add anything in terms of what the role DHIC has played in trying to help them meet that commitment.
Yeah, we've been we're speaking with them and talking with Northwood Raven for, I guess, 3 or 4 years now, because we submitted a preliminary tax credit application a couple years ago and then took last year off, and now are kind of back again. With basically the same, project that was proposed a couple of years ago. But it's our understanding that what we're kind of calling the purchase price for the site is really an infrastructure reimbursement to Northwood Raven, not necessarily for land, but kind of the site for affordable housing. It's sort of pro rata share of overall infrastructure costs that they use. That if these things weren't there already, then that would be something that the project would have to pay for anyway, conceivably. So it's like master stormwater systems and that type of thing. So that's sort of somewhat the basis of the purchase price. It's not exactly that same amount. It's actually a little bit less than the calculation that they gave for our sort of share of these infrastructure improvements. So does that help you a little bit more, or?
Yeah, that's very helpful. Thank you.
And I'm not sure if this is the right time to say it, but I would like to just say that there was an announcement or some communication this week from the North Carolina Housing Finance Agency that one of the rules in the program for tax credits involves construction cost caps. And if a project goes above these sort of limits that they impose, and you get negative points, which would lead you to not have a successful project. Because if you don't get all the points on the application, then you're kind of not in the running on a 9% project typically. So what that means is that since we don't have to artificially constrict ourselves within those cost caps in our tax credit requests, that we can actually request from them more of what the project actually needs, because it was sort of artificially lowered because of those construction cost caps before. So ultimately, I don't think we're going to need the entire amount that that's before you now to approve. And it was our idea that we would work with staff to, if we get the award and we get further down the road, get the plans drawn, get real construction costs, that amount would never be that high as what you're presented here today. So I wasn't sure if that was in the write-up or if you had heard about that, but I would call this like the absolute sort of worst case or largest amount that the project would ever need. And we expect that it's going to be quite a bit lower in the end. So that would leave you more funds for other projects down the road. And that just happened this week. So it was a very, very recent.
Thank you.
Did that make sense?
Yeah, we heard about it from another.
Okay, good.
Thank you. All right, I have Ms. Stegman followed by Ms. Miller-Fouché.
Thanks. Just 2 quick questions. So the affordability, being able to ensure long-term affordability on this, how does the town do that in this case?
So it has to be 30 years because it's tax credit. And then Natalie, I think I'm going to kick that one to you to kind of describe your approach to how you typically, because I know that your record is not selling the property at 30 years.
Right. I mean, we can say that, as a local nonprofit, that's our mission. And so we've never sold any properties. And basically, even though the affordability period is 30 years for the tax credits, after the investor earns all of their benefits after 15 years, usually a couple of years later, there's a refinancing event. And at that point in time, any kind of new first mortgage lender is going to want another, extended loan term as well. So typically we would go back to any of our public sector lender partners and would request any kind of extensions on affordability that would be needed for us to refinance the property, do any kind of renovation work that's needed, sort of recapitalize it and keep it going again. We're actually working on our existing portfolio right now, doing that very same thing. So the problem with saying that something's affordable and, forever and ever and ever can cause financing issues because no lender is really going to lend you money if there's absolutely no way that restriction ever goes away. So in case of a foreclosure, which would be extremely rare, any lender is going to want to have those affordability, restrictions removed, or it'd be really hard to find any kind of conventional financing.
So I know obviously you applied for the 9% tax credits. What's the plan if you don't get that for the project in general?
That is a good question. I would think try again. We've had some projects in the past that there was one we did in Cary that took three years of applying. I mean, that would be up to Northwood Raven to see if they still wanted to, work with us. But now that we've gotten this far down the road, I mean, I think we would try again.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Ms. Miller-Fouché.
Yeah, Karen literally asked all of the questions that I had, and I just want to clarity. So LIHTC is for 30 years and then that's it. So thanks, nothing more.
Thank you. All right, this item is open for the public comment period. If you wish to speak to us, we'd love to hear from you. Please use the raise your hand function or *9 on your phone, and Ms. Stegman will call you in. Ms. Stegman, do you see anyone wishing to speak on this item? Okay.
I do not.
Then I will bring it back to the town council. Any statements, or how do you wish to proceed?
I move R1.
Second.
Been moved by Ms. Stegman, second by Mr. Parker to move this resolution. We'll take a roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegman?
Aye.
Ms. Anderson?
Aye.
Ms. Berry?
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen?
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fushi?
Aye.
Mr. Parker?
Aye.
Ms. Ryan?
Aye.
Mr. Searing?
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much, and we wish you good luck. We wish all of us good luck on that. It's a community partnership on this one. So, and we'll wait to hear the results back in August, is our understanding, is when they make the decision. Okay, great. Thank you very much.
Thank you all so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Emily, for filling in. We appreciate it. All right, that brings us to item number 7. Consider an application for conditional zoning for 307 North Roberson from residential 3, R3, to residential special standards conditional zoning district, RSS-CZD. Thank you.
Good evening, council members. Is my screen sharing all right for everybody?
It looks good.
All right, thank you so much. Before you tonight, before I start, my name is Jacob Hunt. I am with the planning department, and this is my first time before you.
Well, welcome, and thank you for presenting to us.
Thank you. Before you tonight is a conditional zoning application, as you said, for 307 North Roberson. Just a little reminder of where this is. It's just north of the Hargraves Community Center, just north of downtown. Staff's recommendation tonight is to close the legislative hearing, adopt a resolution of consistency, and enact Ordinance A, approving the conditional zoning atlas amendment. We are currently at the end of this process. In April, you opened the legislative hearing. Prior to that, Planning Commission reviewed, and that all took place after staff's review. A quick summary of the project. It's on about 2.9 acres. Again, this is conditional zoning from residential 3 to residential special standards. Existing on the site is a single family home. This project will construct 4 affordable housing units comprised of 2 duplexes. Just for a quick refresher, this is the site plan of those duplexes. There are 2 proposed modifications for the site. One is a reduction in the active recreation space to be replaced by passive recreation space. The second modification is the removal of sidewalks along North Roberson Street that would be required for this project, and instead a crosswalk will be provided at the intersection of Roberson and Whitman. Planning Commission voted to approve this project and made a special recommendation or consideration that town staff should study the viability of an always stop at the intersection of Roberson and Whitaker. Similarly, town council made a recommendation that they would also like to see this take place. Town staff is currently studying and working to bring in the future a proposal for an always stop at the intersection of Roberson and Whitaker, but that is separate entirely from tonight's rezoning proposal. Again, quickly, the recommendation is to close the legislative hearing, adopt a resolution of consistency, and enact Ordinance A. The applicant is available for questions tonight, but does not have a presentation.
Okay, thank you. If you can bring us back, perfect. Okay. Council members, clarifying questions. Mr. Parker?
Yeah, and this is a question for staff, and my memory may be faulty, so if it is, I apologize. But I seem to recall that when we got the packet for, back in April, when the staff went through the various advisory board recommendations, that the staff, and if I'm mistaken, please correct me, that the staff felt that an always stop at that intersection was not warranted. So if my memory is correct, why are we moving ahead with it?
I was not in attendance for the last council meeting, but it's under study. It's not at the direction of the council, is my understanding that it's under study. If we find it to not be appropriate.
It looks like Judy wants to share
Judy,
something with us.
yeah.
I just wanted to give Jacob a little support that our town, we have a town bike and ped task force group that is looking at it and is trying to figure out how to make that work. So we haven't definitively said yes or no from a staff level, and that would be before you as the council to put that stop sign in place. It's a part of the town code.
But what was there a recommendation by staff back in April that you not move ahead with a stop sign?
It was a initial response. We are working with the town engineer and our transportation planning folks to come to a complete conclusion. It's a town street, so we have the ability to figure that out.
The council asked the staff to look into it. So.
Yeah, and that's where we are.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Miller-Fushi?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I literally live a few, houses up from there, and then always stop at that intersection makes absolutely no sense. And so I just wanted to put that out there. And if it's something that we asked, and if staff didn't feel that it was necessary to recommend, I don't know. So just adding that to it, I don't see it making any sense. And I live literally a few houses down from there.
All right, thank you. All right, this item is open to the public. Oh, sorry, Ms. Berry.
I can wait until the comments. It's more of a comment than a question, so thank you.
All right, this item is open to the public. Anyone wishing to make a comment on this item, we welcome your comments at this time.
Nobody's signed up or raised hand.
Okay, well, we'll bring it back to the council then. Ms. Berry, first up.
Thanks. I anticipated that. I remember this conversation, this discussion in the Planning Commission as well as in the council. And my recollection was that there was a desire to slow down traffic there. And I thought, my recollection was that the stop sign would help with that, given the slope there. So I know you live there, Paris, stop making that face, but that's where I am. And so I can understand why the town is moving in that direction, because I recall both conversations, both in the Planning Commission where that suggestion was raised, as well as the follow-up conversation in the council. So.
I see your hand up, but I was just going to say, we've asked the staff to study it and they'll come back with a recommendation and we can debate it at that time if you want, but you're welcome to make comments about that or this project at this time. Ms. Miller-Fushi?
Yes, I think that there are other ways to calm traffic there other than putting an always stop. And I'll just put that there. Again, I live there, so.
Great, all right. Any other comments? I'll just say we're excited about any opportunity to increase some density and some affordable housing and all those kinds of things. So we're excited about this. Is there a motion, please?
I move we close the hearing.
Second.
To move by Mr. Nguyen tentatively and seconded by Ms. Anderson to close the public hearing at this time. Roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fushi.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well.
I move the resolution of consistency.
Second.
We like that. So moved by Mr. Nguyen, second by Ms. Anderson to approve the resolution of consistency. Sorry, get a little punchy here too. All right, roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Wynn.
Aye.
I forgot Miss Anderson. Sorry. Oh my God. I was looking at her because she was giving me a grin and I was looking at her. I was called on her. Sorry. Miss Anderson.
Hi.
Mr. Wynn.
Aye.
Miss Miller Fucci.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Miss Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
Mayor says aye as well.
I move, I don't know what the third one is. I move the third
Resolution
one.
A, right?
Resolution
Ordinance
A.
A.
Ordinance A. Ordinance
Second.
Resolution A.
Second.
Moved by Mr. Wynn, second by Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Roll vote. Okay, we're all getting jumpy here. Ms. Stegman said aye already. So Ms. Anderson, you're.
Oh, you mean A comes first? All right. Aye.
I'm gonna mix it up a little bit. Ms. Berry,
Aye.
Mr. Wynn,
Aye.
Ms. Miller Fucci,
Aye.
Mr. Parker,
Aye.
Ms. Ryan,
Aye, aye, aye.
Mr. Searing,
Aye.
and Mayor says aye as well. Y'all making me laugh. Sorry. Thank you very much. We're excited to move forward. And good job, Jacob, on your first presentation. And we appreciate all the people that work together to make this happen. All right. We're on to item number 8. Open the legislative hearing for conditional zoning application for 107 Johnston Street.
And good evening. I'm Judy Johnson with our planning department, here with a fairly brief presentation on the project at Peach Apartments. And it is in our Pine Knolls Neighborhood Conservation District. And I can't seem to get anything to, there we go. So the property is located on Johnson Street. You can see Lincoln Center is just to the south, Merritt Mill Road, traveling along the eastern part of the right-hand side of the screen. This is, we're opening the legislative hearing tonight, looking to hear any public comment and continuing this hearing to your June 8th meeting. You've seen this, we're at the middle, starting the process of going through council. We've gone through staff and advisory boards. The project is 3 lots in the Pine Knolls neighborhood, just under 3/4 of an acre. It's currently zoned residential 3. We're looking for conditional zoning to zone this to residential special standards. The property is now vacant. The Pine Knolls Community Center, this is the lot, or one of the lots is where the Pine Knolls Community Center was, and that has been removed. The proposal before you tonight is to construct 10 affordable dwelling units. I'll very briefly run through the site plan. I know the applicant will give you a much more robust visual of the site plan, but the property line, the entrance there coming in off of Johnson Street, the building units there, the peach color is their recreation space, and they have I believe, a community garden and a playground, as well as this walking trail around that. And I bring your attention to this one little spot up here in the up adjacent to Johnson Street. They are asking for one modification to regulations, and this would be the setbacks in the residential special standard zoning districts are 10 feet. They are asking for this shelter to be able to encroach into that. It would be fairly close to the street. You can see on that site plan there, I guess it would be just under 3 feet from the property line. They're asking for an encroachment of 7 feet 2 inches. And the purpose of this is for like rideshare service, easy rider service, a place for folks to wait near the streets for those pickups. We did bring this to the Planning Commission last night, and that recommendation was, I believe, forwarded to you earlier today. That Planning Commission had a couple of recommendations, or one recommendation, one comment. One, that they felt that the parking standards that are required for this project, that we ought to consider a modification to regulations so those standards would not be applicable. They could maybe build some of the parking and then come back at a later date and build additional parking if they needed it. and also wanted the town to consider exploring ownership of the playground to ensure the public access and to reduce the cost burden on the Apple or the developer. And that concludes my presentation. Happy to answer any questions if you or if you'd like. I believe Dolores Bailey will be kicking off the presentation for the Peach team.
Welcome, Ms. Bailey. If you want to share with us, we'll hold all our clarifying questions after you're done.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, council members, and Mr. Manager. Thank you for seeing us tonight. My name is Dolores Bailey. I'm the Executive Director of Empowerment Incorporated. And I'm here tonight with staff member Latanya Davis, who is our Operations Manager, Mr. Josh Skurlix, the Peach Architect, and Mr. Phil Post, the Peach Civil Engineer. This evening is historic for us as we bring before you Empowerment's plan to develop the Pine Knolls Empowerment Affordable Community Housing, or PEACH, apartments. We are delighted to be here tonight with the unanimous support from the Affordable Housing, Environmental Stewardship, Transportation and Connectivity, Planning, and Community Design Commissions. We are also asking for your positive vote for an Ordinance A for the PEACH project. Last year, Empowerment Incorporated celebrated 25 years of excellent community service to Orange County. We were voted the Nonprofit of the Year by the Chapel Hill Carrboro Chamber of Commerce, Landlord of the Year by the Orange County Housing, Human Rights, and Community Development Department in 2020. Empowerment currently owns 64 rental units. Of those 64, most of them are currently filled and will not likely become vacant anytime soon. This is the driving force behind the creation of Peach Apartments. That and the fact that Empowerment gets several phone calls daily from people who are either earning a minimum wage, living on a fixed income, or disabled, who are looking for affordable rentals. Peach was also inspired by a gentleman that worked for the University of North Carolina for 11 years, who earned less than $10 an hour and could not afford to pay more than $500 per month in rent. We were not able to help him. The Pine Knolls Community Board offered to sell the site of the community center to Empowerment for affordable housing. They even gave us the name Peach. We approached the town council for conveyance of the town-owned land adjacent to the purchased property. This council voted unanimously to convey that property to Empowerment in November 21. The combination of the lots resulted in 0.7 acres for the Peach project. This project will be 100% affordable, ADA compliant, multifamily, and multi-generational. The targeted residents will be those earning below 30% and no greater than 80% AMI. It will be 10 units, 2 studios, 4 one-bedrooms, 3 two-bedrooms, and 1 three-bedroom. The budget for the Peach Apartments is designed to reach the extremely low-income residents with very little margin for much change. And so for that, we thank you for the expedited approach, the expedited review approach. Changes already to the construction cost due to COVID have increased the bottom line of Peach. But tonight, the Empowerment team will share with you the Peach Apartment project. Let me introduce you to Josh Skurlix, our Peach Architect.
Good evening, Madam Mayor, members of the council, manager. I'm very happy to be here, and thank you, Dolores, for the introduction. If we could start screen sharing, I can start our presentation. Okay. Here we are.
There you go.
Okay, you can all see that. Thank you.
Yes.
I'm very happy to be here. Judy showed you where the site was. It is right north of the Lincoln School. It's also right along Merritt Mill Road, where Merritt Mill Road is the eastern boundary of Pine Knolls. And I'm showing this slide because this slide shows where the bus stops are. They are all within walkable distance from the site. And we think that connectivity is, of course, one of the very most important reasons that this site is so good for this particular use. This is a colorized version of the site plan, and I'm going to ask Phil Post to go through the site planning with you.
Well, Madam Mayor and members of the council, I'm very proud to be working on Dolores's team and with Josh. And if Josh will move the cursor around the site, Judy has shown you where our parking lot entrance will be. It's very near the existing concrete driveway. If you've been to the site, it's practically in the same location. And that will enter into our parking lot that'll have handicap parking and have 11 paved spaces. And if Josh can show us a little green area there, we have provisions for overflow parking, which would be two additional spaces that we call green top parking. It'll be sod over top of a reinforced grid gravel area. So it's a pervious paving type. It would be for overflow uses in case of extra visitors or something like that where it was needed. So our total parking for this project will be 13. There'll be 11 paved spaces and 2 overflow spaces that'll, and as you know, the ordinance requires a range. So our range is 12 to 15 spaces. So we feel like the providing 13 spaces in this way puts us right in the middle of that required range from the ordinance. Just south from that area is the main part of our community, our on-site recreation facilities. So Josh is outlining the playground, the children's playground that we are proposing. Next to that is the round gazebo, would be sort of an outdoor, and now he's showing you the community garden. So the gazebo, the community garden, and the children's playground, we feel like the tenants in this affordable project, 100% affordable project, will be multi-generational. So we want to provide active recreation for a whole range of ages. That will also be associated with the sort of tan pathway that proceeds from that area through the wooded area along our eastern buffer. This green area is a tree save area where we have very large pines and hardwoods, and we're going to not do any grading, but build a natural path through that wooded area in our tree preservation area to provide a walking trail. So our active on-site recreation facilities consist of the natural path, the community garden, the child's playground, and the outdoor gazebo. And then in the southwest corner, that's sort of the purple area, is our bioretention area. And that will provide meet all the town requirements for the stormwater detention and treatment. It'll be a bioretention cell, so it's a planted area. And we're very proud to have partnered with the botanical garden, who's provided a design of some of the plants and shrubs and trees that'll be planted there. And so we're really excited about how that'll become a site amenity. And then you can see our building area, which is in the darker tan, and Josh can give you a much fuller explanation of the building, but the 10 units are located, as Josh is outlining, just to the right of the building is a retaining wall that we're building, and the purpose of that is to limit the grading for the building site so that we're able to preserve a stand of, as I was described, really nice large pines and hardwoods in our northeast corner and along our eastern boundary. So we're very pleased to retain those significant tree areas. And then you can see there's 2 sidewalks, or what we call lead walks, that lead out to the street, one from the center part of the building and one that will provide handicap access from our handicap parking spaces, and then up to the street there. And now Josh is circling our mobility shelter. So we feel like, because of the nature of the affordable residents here, we are absolutely certain that not all of the tenants will have their own vehicle or have access to a vehicle. And so we fully believe that they'll be dependent on what we call point-to-point pickup. It may be Uber, it may be family members, it may be other ride-sharing services. And we wanted to have a place for our very young and possibly our elderly residents to be out of the rain, be out of the sun, be able to sit and wait for their ride share, where they would be able to, promptly walk to the curb and enter a ride share. So we call this our mobility shelter. It's really going to look and function just as a town bus shelter, but of course there's no bus service on Johnson Street, so we've named it a mobility shelter, but it is essentially just as you would expect to have a town bus shelter anywhere else in town. And as Judy has told you, this will be in the front setback area, and the town considers it to be a structure. And so we've asked for an exception to regulations to allow the mobility shelter to be in the setback, which would be where you would typically have a bus shelter. It's right very adjacent to the curb. So we think it's logical. We've certainly gotten strong support from the 5 advisory boards that Dolores mentioned, because each one also recommended to you that you approve this exception. So we're very pleased with the support of the advisory boards. So I'll stop right there. That's my introduction to the site. If there's any questions, I know you'll come back. Thank you very much.
Thank you. You can bring us back to full screen.
Thank you. Thank you, Phil. I'm going to spend just a short minute on the our stormwater facility. This is the sketch that the North Carolina Botanical Garden has prepared for us. We're very excited about this particular element of the site, because not only is it going to give us, we believe, a very up-to-date way of managing stormwater, but we're also intending to use it as a learning center for this kind of, managing stormwater and maintaining plant life. So we're hoping that we can engage the botanical garden on a longer term basis to come and give instruction to people who may be living in this in Peach Apartments, so that they can self-maintain the stormwater structure. So we're very excited about that as a feature. The building itself contains 6 units on the ground floor. There are studio units closest to the street, each of them with a porch, and then 1-bedroom units in back of them. And then at the very back part of the site, there's a 2-bedroom and a 3-bedroom. The units on the ground floor are all not only, they're ADA accessible, and they're also wheelchair handicapped accessible, because of the flatness of the site really allows us to provide wheelchair access to each and every unit on the ground floor. So we're very pleased that the whole 50% of our units are wheelchair accessible. The units are also being designed to what's called universal design standards. Some of you may have heard that, but these standards go a little bit beyond ADA in terms of helping people who may have challenges with the built environment navigate these units more easily. On the second floor, there are 2 1-bedrooms and 2 2-bedrooms. And the stairways, which you can see very lightly here, are outdoor stairways. So there is air movement throughout the whole building or set of buildings. The units on the second floor are also accessible, but they're not wheelchair accessible. The elevations, the building materials are incredibly residential. We're using hardy plank, double hung windows, vertical siding, hip roofs. And I want to show you the south elevation. We have increased the roof area on the south elevation. I have a better picture of that. Well, to incorporate solar panels if we can find a donor who is willing to provide them for the project. If we don't find a donor on day one, the roof area is still here to enable us to incorporate solar down the road. This is an illustration of the wall that we're using to navigate the grade differences so that we can retain the trees to the east and the north of the site. And this is a rendering of the building. I just want to point out very quickly that we're using residential forms here, and the larger part of the building is on the back of the site, closer to the Lincoln School. As the building approaches Johnson Street, the forms get smaller and lower. They become one story, so that's going to help the building fit into the neighborhood much more easily. That concludes my part of this presentation, and I think we're open to any questions.
Thank you. Okay, council members, clarifying questions. Ms. Ryan.
You said that you were going to be between 30 and 80% affordable. Do you have a breakdown of what units would be at what level?
We don't have the specifics yet, Amy. What we have done with our performer, though, is put about 4 of those units, 30%, at least the 2, we're hoping for the 2 studios to be less than 30%. So that's the intention, is to really cater towards the lower end. But what we know we got to do, we don't have that complete mix yet, just because we're not sure of all the cost, what the cost is going to turn out to be. Pavani, do you want to share any more about that?
Yeah, so right now what we have, I can just pull up the, okay, so right now what we have is at the below 50% AMI, we have 3 units at the efficiency level, 4 units at the 1-bedroom, 2 units at the below 60% at the 2-bedroom, 1 unit at the 3-bedroom. So as of now, everything is between, so below 30 up to 60%. Based on the cost and the subsidy, we might have to put 1 unit in the 60 to 80%, which will cover fair housing choice, people with the vouchers. And so everything will be within that affordability range, but that's the breakdown right now.
Great, thank you.
Other clarifying questions before we hear from the public? I'll just ask if you've reached out to Orange County. They have the climate tax grant distribution for energy efficiency twice a year. They are looking for projects like this. Solar panels on an affordable housing building would be something that they would definitely consider. So they're funding, and they don't get as many applications as they have funding. So it's a good thing to apply for.
Thank you for that. No, we hadn't considered it yet, but we will. Thank you.
Good. All right, well, I'll open this up for the public. If there's anyone from the public wishing to make a comment on this project, please use the raise your hand function or the *9 on your phone.
Robert Beasley.
Hey there,
Welcome.
can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I just want to say I've followed this project since last fall when it went forward for the land transfer from the town. And everything about it has been handled just so well. In that session, it was really obvious why the land should be transferred. You know, the history of the land was transparent. It was clear, you know, the rationale for the decision. The review in the ESAB, I believe it was, that I saw a couple of weeks ago, I was really struck by how the developer really embodied in this site all of these values that we have in Chapel Hill, with environmentalism, with providing aspects of the development that help it integrate into the surrounding neighborhood, make it part of the community, have it solar ready. Miss Bailey and Empowerment have really ticked all the boxes with this, especially with the segments that it is positioned for, with less than 30% AMI and less than 50%. It really is a great affordable housing development, and I just can't say enough good things about it. That's all. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, I'll bring it back to council. We are not voting this evening. This is the first of 2 public hearings, and we're glad for the expedited review of affordable housing projects. Are there any comments to be shared tonight? Ms. Ryan, then Mr. Nguyen.
Yeah, congratulations on the ADA, on the universal design, on the solar, on the bioretention, all those things. You've done a really nice job. I appreciate that. In terms of the shelter, I don't really have an issue with it being in the setback. We had a family member who used Easy Rider a lot because of limited mobility, and it would have been kind of hard for her to walk out to the road. She generally had to get picked up much closer to her doorway. So I don't know if that's something that you all need to talk about a little bit more. Again, if you really feel like the road is the best place, that's fine. But again, she had trouble getting that far. So it would have something nearer the door would have been easier for her. And the Planning Commission recommended the town taking over the playground, which I looked at it. And if it were near the road, maybe, but this is so interior to the site, I can't see supporting that. So, but thank you. You've done a really nice job here.
Thank you.
I think I saw Mr. Nguyen and Ms. Anderson.
Yeah, I just wanted to quickly say, great job. And it's so amazing to see how this project has come along for empowerment. And I always love supporting empowerment. So really appreciate all y'all have done, and congrats on all the dubs.
Okay.
Thank you.
Ms. Anderson, then Ms. Berry.
Yeah, I love what you've done with this project. I think it just does so many good things. It's really exciting. I can't wait to see it happen. And I would also echo just reaching out to the county about any climate support they can provide. But I am looking forward to this coming back, and thank you for all this attention to detail and all the great things you included.
Thank you.
Ms. Berry.
Thank you. Very exciting project, very exciting. I had the fortune when I had some free time and wanted to nerd out, I visited the TCAP meeting. And at that time, they were discussing this project. And one of the considerations that they placed upon the applicant was to consider placing a conduit, an electric vehicle conduit in the parking area. I would not be in support of that. Considering who is going to be living here, it just doesn't make sense to put that expense, that burden on the applicant. If we, the town, really want that, we can discuss it later, but then I think we should underwrite that. But considering that this is an affordable housing project and they've done so well with meeting all of these other standards that we have and going beyond, I would say definitively for myself, no.
Okay, I'll wrap us up here. Also excited about this project. Want to ask, I forgot to ask, you're doing all electric, is that correct?
That's correct.
We're trying to
It's
move
all
towards
electric.
that. And I would say, I think I disagree with the conduit scenario, because I know that running it, like just being conduit ready or EV ready is not very expensive, and EVs are going to be the future. And we're talking about this project being there for 50 years. And so it would be much easier just to run the conduit before you pour the cement for the parking area. So it's not that expensive to do that, but I understand if that's not where you go with that. I did, not to put a damper in all this, but I do need to remind council that we have new rules in place for people who serve on our nonprofit boards about being able to vote on a project where you serve on the board. You can make comments all you wish. You're not supposed to advocate, but you can make comments. I do know that we had a few council members on the empowerment board. So I will be asking when this comes back for a vote for you to recuse yourself if you still are. I believe a couple of you made some changes, but I'm not aware of those yet. So we need to ferret that out before June 8th. So I just give you that heads up. We're going to be going through those lists and figuring out how we work our budget with all that as well. But I know that several of you have or still serve on the empowerment board, which is great, except that you're not allowed to vote on projects where the town's involved with processing this. So that being said, is there a motion to defer the public hearing to continue the public hearing to June 8th?
So moved.
Second.
Moved by Ms. Berry, second by Ms. Ryan to continue the public hearing to June 8th. I'll need a roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fushi.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. You all moved around again. So thank you and thanks for coming forward. And we look forward to seeing you back on June 8th.
Thank you.
Yeah, great. Good job. All right. That brings us to item number 9. Consider amendments to Chapter 21 of the Chapel Hill Code of Ordinance to regulate speeds in accordance with the Vision Zero resolution. And just before we get started, I had a lot of questions today about the dooring ordinance. So we will be covering that as part of this item just to make sure people are aware. So welcome, Chief, and looks like Mr. Powell. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, hi, good evening, Mayor and Council and our public. Let me go ahead and share my presentation here. All right. Assuming y'all can see my slide deck.
We can.
All right, great. My name is Jordan Powell. I'm the Complete Street Specialist for the Town of Chapel Hill in the Planning Department. Here to present on a handful of traffic code ordinance text amendments. You should have those full text amendments in your packets. So I'll be doing an overview of each of those without the full language in the slides here. So just a quick overview of what we'll be talking about. In these traffic code changes, we'll have a dooring ordinance, a townwide speed limit update, speed limit changes proposed to Piney Mountain Road and Legion Road. We will have a school zones amendment and a neighborhood slow zones amendment as well. So starting with the dooring ordinance, I've got a definition of dooring here, which is pretty simple: opening a door of a motor vehicle onto another road user. The recommendation here is to update the traffic code to include a dooring ordinance. Some context for that: there's 40 states out of 50 that have dooring ordinance on state law. Right now, North Carolina does not. There's many municipalities that do, including Raleigh, just down the road. I've listed a few other governments that have these on the books, just for your reference, as far as sort of our broader region with Washington, D.C. and the state of Virginia. And this ordinance ultimately assists with incident reporting, citing, and insurance claims in the instance of a dooring. And the background for this is that this is currently a tool that many states and municipalities have in their toolkit to use when responding to incidents, and it is not one that the Town of Chapel Hill currently does, despite the fact that some of our neighbors do. And so the recommendation is to update the traffic code accordingly to incorporate that tool into the toolkit for our town and our police force. Moving on to the speeds ordinance. As some of you know, probably, Town Council passed a Vision Zero resolution in October of 2021. This resolution commits the town to eliminating traffic fatalities and serious injuries by 2031, though we do hope to accomplish that much sooner. And as much as possible, Vision Zero should be proactive rather than reactive, meaning that we don't wait for tragedy to happen before we make streets safer. Vision Zero considers traffic deaths and serious injuries to be preventable, and also that humans make mistakes. And so we should build a system in our town that makes it harder for those mistakes to become fatal. And so through Vision Zero, we as a town committed that policy and street design should prioritize safety instead of vehicular speed and efficiency. And this ultimately will lessen the severity of crashes. As you can see on your screen, higher speeds correspond to worse injuries and fatalities. A 35-mile-per-hour crash leads to a more than 50% chance of a pedestrian death. And I've got a graphic on there that shows sort of the almost exponential increase as you increase by 10 miles per hour. So that's a bit of background on the speeds ordinance, which the recommendation here is to update the traffic code to reflect the townwide speed limit as 25 miles per hour rather than 35 miles per hour, while carving out state-owned roads and any other roads that are otherwise posted. Some additional background on this: North Carolina law sets municipal speed limits statewide at 35 miles per hour, but the state law does allow municipalities to lower that through their local code. And with two exceptions, which we will address on the next slide, all town of Chapel Hill owned roads are at 25 miles per hour or less currently. That's more than 70% of the roadway in Chapel Hill that's currently 25 miles per hour or less. There are citywide speed limit signs, as you see pictured on your screen, as you enter town limits on Martin Luther King, on NC 54, and on Old Durham Road. Now, these roads are 35 miles per hour, but these signs, as I mentioned, only accurately represent less than 30% of the roadway in our town. Additionally, the traffic code outlines the speed limit on every street. So if this amendment was enacted, this would eliminate the need to outline every road that is 25 miles per hour. So that would greatly simplify this section of the traffic code. So again, the recommendation here is to update the townwide speed limit to come into accordance with our currently existing best practices in setting speed limit, and to state that our townwide speed limit is 25 miles per hour, except on state-owned roads and except as otherwise noted. Moving on, as I mentioned, that we have two town-owned roads that are owned and maintained by the town of Chapel Hill that are currently listed at 35 miles per hour. I've included pictures of segments of these roads on the slide so that you can see the design and width of these roads, both of which are conducive to lower speed limits. The posted speed of a street does inform the type of infrastructure and safety elements that can be added or included on a roadway. So a 35 mile per hour street has more limiting options of what additional elements you can do when compared to a 25 mile per hour street. Additionally, there are studies that show that sign changes without otherwise changing the street design or configuration can impact average driver speeds. And since at this time, we're not recommending any additional changes to these streets other than the speed limit, we're encouraged that these studies will in fact make these streets safer for all road users. And you can see the streets depicted on your screen from an aerial view here. Piney Mountain is on the left of your screen. It's currently at 25 miles per hour from its northern terminus to Summerlin Road. At this point, it changes to 35 miles per hour to its terminus at Martin Luther King. The street design and configuration does not change at that point to really reflect the increase in speed limit. Legion Road on the right side of your screen is currently posted at 35 miles per hour from end to end. And it does have bicycle and pedestrian facilities on this road. So in addition to bringing these two streets into accordance with the town best practice of speed limit setting, we do feel that sort of the residential character of these streets and their multimodal facilities on them and their relationship to adjacent residential streets make it pretty logical for us to lower the speed limits on these two streets to 25 miles per hour for the length of these two streets. And you have the recommendation there listed at the top of your screen, which is to change the speed limit from 35 to 25 on Piney Mountain Road and Legion Road. Next up, we have the recommendation to update the school zone section of our traffic code to include all Chapel Hill Carborough City schools that are within Chapel Hill's corporate limits. Currently, 4 schools are not codified as school zones. In Chapel Hill, these are Rashkus, Glenwood, Northside, and Scroggs. This is likely because North Carolina state law sets out school zone speed limits at 25 miles per hour on state-owned roads. So the schools that are included in our code are the ones that are on 35 mile per hour state-owned roads. with those higher speed limits. State law does permit us to lower school zone speed limits to 20 miles per hour, which is what this code amendment would reflect on these town-owned roads and the schools that sit on them. And so the recommendation here listed at the bottom of your screen is to update the school zone code to include all Chapel Hill Carrboro City schools within the Chapel Hill corporate limits. Our next recommendation here is to authorize the town manager to establish neighborhood slow zones as a traffic calming method for the town of Chapel Hill. I've included 2 useful descriptive statements on neighborhood slow zones on your screen. Now, these are defined by the National Association of City Transportation Officials, sort of a best practice setter in safe streets and progressive design. And so these zones are specifically designated areas with slower speed than otherwise similar streets in the same jurisdiction. And importantly, they're neighborhood scale or site specific zones used for addressing high priority areas. And those definitions really, and this recommendation really fall in line with the town's commitment to creating safe streets for all through Vision Zero through a system-wide approach, a neighborhood scale approach. And so instead of responding to concerns by installing traffic calming methods one block at a time, neighborhood slow zones really takes a broader approach to addressing neighborhood concerns by establishing community-driven traffic calming in an entire zone of a residential area. As an anecdote that may not come as a surprise to most folks here, speeding on residential streets is a very common concern of neighbors living across the town. And so this, again, sort of adds another tool to our toolkit as far as addressing what is a very frequent concern that we hear from neighbors. Important to note is that this amendment does not establish any neighborhood schools or neighborhood slow zones, excuse me. As the creation of these is ultimately a very deliberate process that's informed by Vision Zero data analysis, equity considerations, and an immense amount of community engagement. But rather, this ordinance amendment simply authorizes us to incorporate neighborhood slow zones into our traffic calming method. So the recommendation here is listed at the bottom of your screen to authorize the town manager to establish neighborhood slow zones as a traffic calming method. And we have taken these recommendations to our Transportation and Connectivity Advisory Board and Planning Commission. So I've included some of the key feedback that we received from those groups on this slide. First, both groups stress the importance of education and engagement efforts in coordination with these text amendments, feedback that really falls in line with the community approach that we take with Vision Zero already. But specifically, we discussed the importance of education with regard to the dooring ordinance. As we know, as you can assume, sort of putting this into code will not change the way that people open their doors of their cars. So it's critically important that we work with our Vision Zero task force as we are to create education materials and an engagement strategy to introduce concepts such as the Dutch reach and other safe ways to scan the roadway before you open the door of your vehicle. And so engagement and education is paramount to the, really the ultimate success of this particular initiative. Second, we discussed the combination of data-informed decision-making and community-centered planning when it comes to implementing these Vision Zero decisions. So our Vision Zero Executive Committee and Task Force will really play a key role in balancing the importance of data-driven decisions and community engagement when implementing these decisions. And lastly, both groups stress the importance of determining the appropriate offense for dooring. And Chapel Hill Police and Planning have worked closely on this and are confident that we have presented a responsible ordinance amendment that will make Chapel Hill streets safer for all. So we have our recommendation here, which is to enact the Code of Ordinance amendments related to a townwide speed limit, Piney Mountain Road and Legion Road speed changes, dooring ordinance, school zone amendment, and neighborhood slow zone authorization. And that's all I have.
Thank you, Jordan. That was helpful. All right. Are there clarifying questions from council? Ms. Anderson?
Yeah, thank you, Jordan, for your presentation. I think all these are great ideas. I'm just wondering if you could talk a little bit about, my understanding is that really the engineered speed of a road is what controls or what has the most impact on how fast people go. So, if you narrow it or you add a bike lane or a sidewalk or something, that is the most effective in getting people to slow down. So I'm wondering, when you talked about the research about just lowering the speed limit, I know that we can't necessarily predict exactly what that will look like in Chapel Hill, but I'm wondering what the research said about how much impact one might expect from just lowering the speed limit, but not changing how the road is engineered.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm not prepared with the studies right now. I'd be more than happy to share those afterward.
Yeah.
But we
And
do
I don't mean to put you on the spot. I'm just wondering kind of generally, like, what, maybe the better question is, are there places where we can lower the speed limit and, and that's an easy kind of low hanging fruit thing to do? And are there places where then we're going to have to go beyond that and do something else to ensure that people don't just ignore the speed limit as they seem to sometimes now?
Yeah, it's a great question. And so, the two streets that will be changed by these text amendments, they're really configured right now in accordance with a 25 mile per hour speed limit. One of them is 25 miles per hour and then sort of changes to 35 without changing the configuration of the street at all. And then the other one has some relatively newer bike lanes that does narrow the street, the driving path of the street. So those two streets really are configured to be a bit more safe at 25 miles per hour. But the studies show that, even if you don't change the street engineering design at all, you can see, on the low end, 2 to 3 average miles per hour, slower speeds, and sometimes upwards of 10, which I guess would be what you hope if you drop it by 10 miles per hour.
Yeah, that would make our math perfect.
Yeah. So we do see success from that, just in changing the signs. And so, but like I mentioned, on those two streets, I'm not as concerned with the engineering of the streets. If you think of a street like Weaver Dairy Extension, that street is not designed for slower speeds. And so changing the speed limit on that street would really not impact driver speeds because it is an immensely wide street. Whereas these two streets don't fit those same sort of principles.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Ms. Berry, followed by Ms. Stegman.
Okay, you just mentioned Weaver Dairy Extension. Is it not already at 25 miles per hour?
Weaver Dairy Extension is at 25 miles per hour, but it's designed more like a 35 mile per hour street.
For sure,
so it's sort of the opposite of what we are enacting here tonight. And so speeding is a regular concern that our police force addresses on that street because, as Councilmember Anderson was reflecting, if a street is designed for higher speeds, having a lower speed limit is not going to be effective enough there. So that's something we deal with on that street. And that's why factoring in design is an important part of our recommendation here tonight as well.
Okay, I was just confused why you mentioned that. But when you do lower these, if these are lowered, how do you communicate? See, I'm used to traveling on Piney Mountain Road, and I'm used to it increasing. How are we going to help drivers make that transition?
Yeah, great question. And I should have mentioned that the speeds amendments ordinance here is sort of post-dated to go into effect on July 1st. And so that gives us, if these amendments are enacted by council tonight, that gives us ample time to conduct some progressive community engagement to really get the information out that these roads are changing. And then working with the police force to ensure there's sort of a buffer period that we're not, out there sitting right where it changes and writing a bunch of tickets for folks who are, getting used to a new change. This is commonplace anytime you change a speed limit, that you factor in sort of a buffer period of leniency there.
All right, thank you. That's what I wanted to know. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Stegman, who has a puppy?
Got the puppy. I guess my question, and I know we talked about this before, I still have a little bit of nervousness about the slow zones and the sort of equity of who actually gets, who who actually gets that from the town. And I know the committee is really committed to being data driven, but sort of the intent and implementation don't always match. So I guess I assume that as part of our Vision Zero implementation, you all be coming back to us to report updates and status and that kind of thing. So I'd really like to have an update on that, about how that's really being implemented, and sort of see where resources are going, and just to make sure we're sticking with our kind of equity approach on that, if that's possible.
Yeah, thanks for that, council member. And without getting sort of too far ahead of myself, we will have shortly an updated annual crash report for 2021, which does include updated equity analysis for town. And this is part of that data-driven approach. So sort of layering various equity data analysis onto the town, and sort of having that be part of what informs sort of where we implement various Vision Zero projects. So I imagine that report will be ready for council to review sometime this summer.
Great, thank you so much.
All right. Oh, Ms. Miller-Fouché.
Thank you for that. And thank you, Karen, for really elevating that. I think also, I'm thinking about some of our community centers. I know the Hargrave Center, while it's not a school, it definitely holds a lot of our school-age children. It has a daycare there. And so would really like to see some emphasis put around places and spaces like that within our community, where we know that our kids are going to be, whether it's rec centers or whatnot, but just being aware of that, and really trying to implement some of the same strategies that we would around school zones or whatever. It is in a neighborhood, and so that's good to know that 20 miles an hour would be great, but any kind of speed reduction, crosswalks, those types of things to really be looked at with community places and spaces like that would be great. So thank you for your presentation.
Yeah, thanks for your comment.
Mr. Parker, then Mr. Searing.
Yeah, quick question. I think what you're proposing is really terrific. I was just wondering, what options, if any, do we have to making our state roads safer with lower speed limits? I know we can't, unilaterally legislate it, but are we taking any actions or having any conversations to be able to, get the whole town safe like this, rather than sort of having, parts of the town looking really good and then MLK being, a mess?
Yeah, a question that I think about often, council member, without speaking out of turn, I think that this would signal to our partners at the state that we are committed to slower speeds on our streets. So enacting a new, slower townwide speed limit is something that we would be able to bring to these conversations with our partners at NCDOT to really show that we're putting in policy changes that reflect our commitment to safer streets, and we expect our partners that work within our corporate limits to work with us in good faith on that as well. So I would look at this as an important step in those conversations.
So are those conversations going to are those conversations underway, about to be underway, or is it still, a ways off?
Yeah, we work with NCDOT all the time, and those conversations are not underway because this particular amendment has not been enacted yet. So I haven't brought that to any partnership conversations yet, because there's a chance that council chooses not to do that, and in that case we'd get our cart before the horse a bit. But we do have our division engineer sits on our Vision Zero executive committee with the chief, and and the town manager. And so I think this would be an important element of the next agenda for that group. And so those are ongoing conversations, and this would be an important thing for us to boost our stake.
Great, thank you.
Mr. Searing?
Just a quick question. Could you just expand a little bit on the schools writing in the 4 new schools to the school zone? Just what some of the effects. I know we're talking some stuff that's fairly minimal, but just expand on that a little bit. I'm particularly thinking of Glenwood and the school zone on Raleigh Road, which just never seems much of a school zone, but
Yeah, so as far as the implementation of that is pretty uniform, and we are bound to sort of state regulations as far as the temporal element, when that goes into effect, in the mornings and in the afternoons. That will be pretty standard with all of the other school zones that you see in town. And so we have established in the ordinance amendments that you have what those distances would be and what the roads that those school zones would fall on would be. And so that's where you would see it starting. And as far as how it was executed by drivers, we would like to assume that drivers are being respectful around our schools, but certainly if there is no signage that they're in a school zone, they're likely to be less respectful of that, I would imagine. But that's
so more signage and just the state standards about.
Yeah, so it'll be the signage that you see on the side of the road, and it would be paint in the road as well.
Okay, this item is up for public comment. If you're wishing to make a comment on this item, we'd like to hear from you. And please use the raise your hand function or the *9, and we welcome your comments.
No raised hands.
Okay. Well, I know we bring it back to council. I know some of you've already actually made comments during clarification questions, but that's fine. Are there any other comments to be made, Ms. Ryan?
Yeah, thank you for all this. I just want to echo Ms. Anderson's comments about design speed and how important that is as well. I know we're doing a LUMO update. The engineering and design manual will also be getting updated. So, anything we can do to build those things into our, to have real complete streets in town that are safer, I think will be great. But as you say, this is a good first step.
All right, Ms. Berry.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Powell. I really appreciate the work that you've put into this, along with the team that you've worked with. I do encourage the town staff, the police force, Chief Blue, to help us, help you communicate this out to the public that these changes are being made. I really support this. And the signage, as we think about Franklin Street, I know there are many people who do not realize that it is 20 miles per hour. Many people, and they are cruising. Some are doing 45 coming in there, and then they think they're slowing down to the, not quite 35, but anyway. So yes, we'll continue to work on this, but I very much support this. Thank you.
Okay. Is there a motion out there?
So moved.
Second.
The move by Ms. Berry, second by Mr. Nguyen. Any comments that haven't been shared already besides, yes, we want to move forward? Okay, roll call vote then, please. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fushi.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Thank you very much. And we look forward to hearing more from you later, but go ahead and move forward with these ordinance changes. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Okay, great. All right, that brings us to item number 10, the Orange County Transit Plan update, please.
Evening, Mayor and Council. My name is Brian Litchfield. I'm the director for Chapel Hill Transit. First, applaud you for your continued efforts to move forward with the Vision Zero efforts. Any of those efforts to make Chapel Hill a safer place for bicycle and pedestrians, also makes it a better place for folks going to and from transit. So certainly appreciate your efforts in that regard. We're here this evening to provide an update for you on the Orange County Transit Plan. A few weeks ago, when we talked about the transit budget, we shared a little bit of information about the Orange County Transit Plan, but tonight we'll provide you with much more detail on that. The transit plan is a critical funding component to the Chapel Hill Transit budget. It currently provides about 10% of our operating budget. That includes covering the cost of our Sunday service and other service expansions that we've made over the last several years. It has also helped us meet vehicle replacement needs and supplemented some of the funding that our partners have provided in grants as well. It's funded significant improvements to bus stops and provides a share of the non-federal match, about $14 million for our North-South BRT project. The plan is required to be updated every 4 years. For the current plan update, the county has engaged a team led by Renaissance Planning, and the project manager, Carolyn Dwyer, is with us tonight, and she'll provide the presentation for you to develop the update in coordination with key stakeholders, the community, and the Durham County Transit Plan. This effort was guided by a policy steering committee that was chaired or is chaired by County Commissioner Sally Green and includes representatives from the elected bodies in Orange County, including Councilmember Michael Parker for the town of Chapel Hill. The Chapel Hill Transit staff and the transit partners support the priorities in the draft plan. The priorities help make a big step towards funding increased service on the NS route, which will in the long run support our NSBRT project. And it also helps fund other priorities from your adopted short range transit plan. We understand that not all priorities could be met due to the funding constraints, and we will continue to advocate for funding for things like bus stop improvements and other priorities from the short range transit plan. We also appreciate the work that Carolyn and her team did along with the county to engage not only transit supporters or transit systems and transit supporters, but also the university and UNC Health in the update. Carolyn will provide you with a detailed update, and we welcome your comments and feedback following her presentation. Thank you.
Brian, I'm going to stop you guys. Sorry, we missed one. We had to do 2 enactments in the last item. We need 03, and Ms. Harvey sent me a note. Can I get a motion to?
I move R3.
Second.
I think it's 03.
O3.
Second.
So moved by Ms. Stegman, second by Ms. Berry to move 03 under item number 9. Roll call vote, please. Ms. Stegman.
Aye.
Ms. Anderson.
Aye.
Ms. Berry.
Aye.
Mr. Nguyen.
Aye.
Ms. Miller-Fushi.
Aye.
Mr. Parker.
Aye.
Ms. Ryan.
Aye.
Mr. Searing.
Aye.
And the mayor says aye as well. Hope that covers it. Sorry for the interruption. Thank you.
That's okay. With that, I will turn it over to Caroline to provide a detailed update. And when she's finished, we'll welcome any questions or feedback that you have at that time. Thank you.
Okay, thanks so much, Brian. Good evening, council and mayor. I'm glad to be here giving you an update on the Orange County Transit Plan. I'm Caroline Dwyer with Renaissance Planning based out of our Durham, North Carolina office. And we had a fantastic team working along with us on this project, including Jarrett Walker and Associates and Irma McLaurin of McLaurin Solutions, who provided us with some information and feedback on diversity and inclusion and accessibility in our engagement and outreach process. So I'm going to give you an update on the project process this evening, talk a little bit about how we went through planning the Orange County Transit Plan update, describe what's included in the transit plan update, provide an overview and summary of 2 phases of engagement that we facilitated over the course of the project, describe the proposed projects that are proposed for the transit plan update, describe to you a conceptual transit vision map that's included in the plan update to provide a target for moving towards transit service here in Chapel Hill and in the greater Orange County region in the future, talk a little bit about the documentation for the plan update, and describe our next steps. So we had a 2-pronged approach to this project. Basically 2 things happening kind of simultaneously. The first was a component of analysis and network development. So this involved reviewing existing plans. As Brian mentioned, we started with those short-range transit plans for the transit service providers to better understand some of the unmet priorities that could potentially be funded with the revenues from the transit tax in Orange County. We looked at ridership trends, we looked at needs and other wants and needs for transit riders in the county, while simultaneously facilitating a first phase of public engagement where we really tried to get public input on some high-level goals and worked closely with both our policy steering committee, which, as Brian mentioned, was made up of elected officials throughout Orange County. And then over the course of the project, we worked closely also with the transit service providers and other stakeholders, including UNC. So this project began back in spring of 2020. So we've been at this for a little while. I think we're at a good place now where we can give you an update with some specifics about what could be included in the plan update with the transit tax revenues that are available. So throughout 2021, we were working on some conceptual transit scenarios. We worked closely with the policy steering committee, including a retreat we conducted last summer in July to develop some or identify some community values that we wanted to ensure were represented in the plan update. And then conducted an additional phase of engagement, just wrapped up this spring. And we are now working on documenting the projects and process for the draft plan, moving eventually towards adoption in fall of 2022. So just as a reminder, the reason that there is sort of this gap between where we are right now and the eventual adoption of the plan is because there's also a simultaneous transit governance plan study that is ongoing that will update some of the interlocal agreements that are in place to support cost sharing and other arrangements for different projects that are facilitated between either the different counties or the county and the municipalities. And that's an ongoing process. And we wanted to make sure that was wrapped up prior to the adoption of the plan update. So just for information purposes, so you know what this is, this plan update, it's really looking at revenues that are available over and above projects that are already funded in the 2012 and 2017 plans. So anything that was in there that was programmed to be implemented stays in there. We didn't, we didn't make any changes to that. The only exception, of course, is the light rail transit, which was in both the 2012 and 17 plans, which is no longer represented in either of those plans and will not be part of the update. But any of these existing projects do roll over, and the update is really just looking at, we have a balance of revenue. What can we afford to do with that balance, and what types of new projects can we implement to enhance the service that exists right now? So for our engagement, like I said, we had two phases. The first was back in the fall of 2020. That was sort of a higher level effort, really looking at, what goals and I guess higher order needs needed to be met for transit riders here in the county. We were, I will say, a little bit held back. We were still sort of feeling our way around in the pandemic, trying to figure out what engagement might look like. We did have some great help from the transit service providers who were able to get survey instruments out to riders, both on fixed route transit and also demand response transit. So we did get some feedback from folks. And then we also conducted a virtual transit summit, which we had about 50 participants come together for that during an evening back in October of 2020. Big takeaways from that first round of engagement, folks who are riding or using transit primarily would like to see revenues used to fund transit service that is more frequent, transit service that runs more days per week or more hours per day. That was kind of the clear takeaway from that first phase of engagement. And then in the second phase of engagement, this was, as I mentioned, just this past spring. Really what we were trying to do was to get some of these proposed projects in front of folks who ride transit to ensure that they are meeting needs that were expressed. We did another online survey. We had a much more robust response during that second round. We had over 1,000 participants for the online survey, which I thought was pretty great for an Orange County focused transit plan update. And we were also able to get out to bus stops to talk to folks at some of those higher ridership bus stations and stops in Orange County, both sort of in the core of the county. And we also traveled out to some of the further reaches there to try and capture folks who might be coming into Orange County. As we know, many folks travel in and out of the county every day for work and school and other things. So this map here represents the second survey that we did, and it shows the count of survey responses based on zip code. So we did ask participants of the survey to voluntarily record their zip code so that we could get an idea of where people were responding from. As you can see, the orange represents the highest number of responses. So that's really centered in the middle there of the county, which is what we would have expected. But we were also really glad to see that we were capturing feedback from outside the county as well. As we know, a lot of folks are traveling in and out. So I think that, just the spatial representation looked pretty good to me. It felt like we were capturing not just sort of a small spatial group of folks, but really trying to, reach all of the people who travel in and out of the county. Again, we had some really great partners who were able to help spread the word and get the survey out, via social media and other methods. And then we did a lot of promotion in person of the survey at bus stops to get the word out that way as well. So thinking about the projects that were ultimately selected to be included in the transit plan update, as I mentioned, the projects are funded using revenues that are above and beyond the expenses for projects that are already programmed. So it's the balance of what's remaining after you take out all of the things that we're already funding through previous transit plans. One of the goals that we were provided by the county was that they desired a plan that did not require taking on debt to fund projects. So all of the service improvements that are proposed are able to be fully funded through the transit tax revenues that are projected to be available. We did rely on those Go Triangle financial model forecasts to estimate what is available in future revenues. That's a service that they provide to Orange County as the transit authority and administrator of that transit tax district. And as I mentioned, all of those already programmed capital and service improvements are included in the plans that rolled over from 2012 and 17. So we asked a few questions to determine which projects, as Brian mentioned, unfortunately, it's not possible to fund everything that we know is a need and a priority. So we did have to come up with a way to prioritize the priorities. And we tried to do that by asking some questions. So what we first did was we looked to some of the unfunded or priority projects in the short range transit plans that each of the transit service providers have created over the last few years, because we know that those do represent the needs of transit riders in the county. We tried to ensure that the projects were meeting some of the needs expressed by the public, so service that can extend the hours per day or days per week, or the frequency of service along some of those routes. We worked to identify projects that could reflect values that were identified by the Policy Steering Committee during that retreat that we conducted last summer. So those were equity, environmental sustainability, economic prosperity, affordable and attainable quality of life, and transportation and access for all. And then lastly, ensuring that the projects help move towards supporting a gap in regional connectivity. We know that the discontinuation of the light rail project does leave a gap in that premium transit service that connects the counties in the region. So we try to ensure that the projects that will be included in the update will help move towards a more connected region in the future. So I'm going to go through the projects. Apologies for some of the information that's a little small. I'll try to give you a summary, and then if you have questions, we can loop back at the end on some of the specifics if necessary. So the first project, there's overall, we have 5 service improvement projects and 2 capital investment projects. So I'll start with the service improvements. This first one is focused on US 15501, and it's actually a combination of 3 different routes. 2 of those routes are triangle transit routes, the J and the D route, and then Go Triangles 400, 405. So what we heard from the transit service providers was that approaching this particular project is kind of a bundle of projects, increase the efficiencies of all of the routes, and allowed that funding to go a little bit further for all of them. So it increases some of the connection efficiencies between those projects. So 400, 405 runs along 15501, goes down into campus and then into Carborough. The J route is more focused in Carborough, connects to a park and ride route. And then the D is also on 15501 and extending that service into Patterson Place can allow for some efficiencies between those 2 routes that will provide more frequent service. So 15-minute service in the midday period, improved Sunday and evening service on all of those routes. And then on the J route, the morning peak frequency will be improved to every 10 minutes. And then some service hour extensions in the evening on the weekends. And then there's also 2 capital improvement projects that are proposed for different locations in this corridor. The first is a set of improvements at the intersection of Fordham Boulevard and Ephesus Church, which would provide some pedestrian safety improvements and some transit amenity improvements to enhance the opportunity for making connections between the 2 routes and service providers. And then also down by Manning Drive, also on Fordham, there's a proposed project for what's called a Q-jump lane. So that's basically a signal and a traffic lane that allows the transit vehicle to move in front of cars that are backed up at a traffic signal so that they can stay on schedule and keep moving and get folks where they need to be at the time they're supposed to be there. We all know that's a very congested area. So this is just a way to prioritize the movement of those transit vehicles. And then also along with that, perhaps having an opportunity for this shoulder running bus lanes, like I'm sure many of you've seen on I-40, that's an option there where if it is very congested, the transit vehicle is able to use the shoulder of the road to bypass some of that vehicle congestion. So the second project here that I'll describe is the Chapel Hill Transit CW route. This is another one that's focused primarily in Carborough that runs between Carborough and campus. So this would improve midday service to 30 minutes. You do retain that higher frequency during peak periods, but this would really be an improvement that helps to provide more frequent service, more reliable service during periods that, you know, might not be seen as peak periods for, you know, folks who are not doing like a 9-to-5 job. This just helps provide reliability and frequency throughout the whole day, making the transit service more usable for folks who rely on it. The next proposed project is Chapel Hill Transit's HS route. This is a route that runs down along Rogers Road, Homestead, and MLK. This provides service to several transit reliant neighborhoods. And this project would actually provide weekend service on a route that currently does not have any weekend service in neighborhoods that don't have any weekend transit service. So we really felt like this project hit on some of those equity values and accessibility goals that we were trying to meet. So I think this is this has been a priority, I know, both for folks in the neighborhood and also for Chapel Hill Transit. So it would be great to be able to check this one off the list and provide this much needed service. The next one is some improvements in frequency on the NS route. So this is another one that's important because, as I'm sure you all know, this is the route that is targeted for the bus rapid transit service. And improving service in this corridor helps build ridership, and anything you can do to build ridership, really improves your position for that federal grant funding that is needed to support the BRT project. So, one of the things that the FTA looks for when they're scoring these projects to continue moving them through that federal funding pipeline is ensuring that, the riders are there to use the service. So, incrementally building up that ridership through these types of improvements is important. So this would improve peak frequency in the mornings to every 6 minutes, provide Saturday service until 11 p.m. and Sunday service until 9 p.m. This project does have both an operating cost and a capital cost associated with it, and that capital cost is primarily for additional transit vehicles to support that enhanced service. The next project here is a project that really gets at serving some folks who don't have access to any fixed route transit currently. So this is an extension of a pilot project that Orange County implemented within the last year and a half. It's called a mobility on demand service. Essentially, it's very similar to a demand response where you request a ride and a small, they're using minivans, will come and pick up the rider and take them where they need to go for a relatively small fee. So this essentially provides lifeline transit service to folks who have no transit options available to them at all and would be available throughout the county. The funding would be used to enhance the service that's currently available so that they could provide the service more days per week and more hours per day. So this is just a summary of all the projects that I've just mentioned. So those 5 service improvement projects, and then the 2 capital investment projects. You can see that the implementation years are estimated there on the right. Just a note that, due to the staffing shortages that everyone is suffering through right now, there is the potential that some projects that are proposed may be delayed until next year, until, hopefully, folks can be found to operate some of the service that's needed on these routes. And then just as kind of a quick info summary, basically to calculate the service that can be supported, we use a cost per hour of service for each transit provider. And that's based on, what it costs right now for them to run their service, and then we do an estimate of how many hours can be funded at that cost per hour, and then we do adjust that for inflation out into the future, so that we know that we have enough money to continue funding that service. So the other piece here that we're looking at, so those are the things that we know and we're pretty sure that we have funding to support through that transit tax revenue that's being generated through sales tax. It was also really important to the policy steering committee and staff to ensure that we had an idea of where we're moving towards in the future. So there's a lot of transit being discussed and planned in the region. Some of it is, more premium transit service, like what you'll see on the NS route along Martin Luther King Boulevard with the bus rapid transit. Some of it right now is maybe just able to support something like an express service for connecting commuters in and out of the county. But we wanted to make sure that we represented those future transit priority corridors in the plan so that there is a unified vision to work towards in the future. So what we tried to do was, we leaned on some of the existing regional plans, like the Metropolitan Transportation Plan that's put together by the MPO, and then other transit plans that were created by the different transit service providers to identify some of their priorities for these transit priority corridors. so that we can ensure that the investments that are being made now are moving towards that vision in the future, and also to help prioritize future funding and investments for transit to make sure that they're moving towards that regional vision. So just to kind of reiterate, this is a very conceptual map. None of these lines exist. They are there to show you what is possible and where we might focus transit service in the future. Stop and end points, or starting and ending points, are not fixed in stone by any stretch of the imagination. So this is really kind of just something to work towards, and a vision to coalesce around for all the different transit service providers in the region. The transit plan update, we are going to try and create something that is engaging and accessible. I know these types of documents can be impenetrable and inaccessible, so we want to try and make something that people can easily look at and understand how that transit revenue is being used to supplement the transit service and how that responds to things that they've said are important. So we will provide an executive summary within that document that can be used to quickly identify the different things that are being funded. We hope it can also be used for you all as elected officials to advocate for additional transit funding to fund some of the things that we would love to be able to spend some additional money on, but just don't have the resources currently. The transit plan itself will also have a list of what we call unfunded priorities or projects. So these are all the things that are also really important, but just, because we can only pick so many and only have so many resources, just unfortunately didn't make the cut this round, but should certainly be prioritized if more funding becomes available or through future plan updates. So there'll be a description of all the projects and all of the financials in there, along with some of the spatial trends and socioeconomic trends and drivers that were considered when we thought about the plans and projects that should be included. That conceptual transit vision will be in there, and then a thorough budget and implementation plan and schedule, along with some recommendations for next steps for moving towards some of those longer term, bigger ticket transit items and projects that you might be considering for the future. So our next steps basically are providing these updates to all of you throughout Orange County. We're currently working on wrapping up that draft documentation, which will go out to our policy steering committee this week in preparation for their final meeting on the 20th of May. We'll receive comments and feedback from all parties until around the 3rd of June, at which point we will deliver a final update document to the county, who will then walk that update through the approval and adoption plan in the fall of 2022, as I mentioned earlier. So that is pretty much the long and short of it. So I'll take your questions and comments.
Thank you. Can you bring us back to full screen?
Yes.
Clarifying questions, Ms. Berry and Ms. Ryan?
Thank you, Ms. Dwyer. Good to see you tonight. Thank you for that presentation. I have a question about the mobility on demand vehicles. Those vans, are those gas or electric?
I believe they're gas. Yes, Brian's nodding his head. So right now, the vehicles that they're currently using, yeah, they're conventional combustion engine vehicles.
Is there a move to, or is there the thought to move towards electric vehicle for those?
I don't know that Orange County has mentioned it specifically to me. There may be. I know that I would say, more broadly in transit, more generally, there is definitely a desire to move towards those more sustainable vehicles. They are, expensive, but I think the idea is to integrate them, through a process of attrition as older vehicles age out, figure out ways to integrate those more sustainable vehicles. I know I've seen Chapel Hill had a few come online recently, which was super exciting. So I know Brian would love to get some more in there. And hopefully, you know, with some of the new federal programs, there may be additional opportunities for those types of capital investments. And we can certainly take a peek and see if there's recommendations we can make for that in the plan update.
I can add a little bit to
Great.
that as well too. I think Carolyn's right on. The smaller vehicle market has been lagging significantly behind the larger bus market. So there's a couple options out there right now. In fact, as we're looking at replacing our demand response vehicles for 24 and 25, we're in the process of testing some of those vehicles. But so far, it wouldn't be something that I would recommend us purchasing at this point in time because of their performance and everything else. It's just really new. It's very similar to the school bus market. There's talk about moving in that direction, but they're not quite there. That the heavy vehicle market is where it's at right now, and where they feel they can make the most effort. So we're continuing to look at those things for Chapel Hill Transit. I'm not sure what the county's interests are in that area, but I imagine they would be interested as well too.
Thank you.
Sorry, Ms. Ryan, followed by Mr. Searing. I had to get the button there.
I could just go ahead, but I know that I'm following protocol. Yeah, thank you for that presentation and for all the complicated work that you do on these plans. When we get to the final plan approval and adoption, who is it that actually votes on that?
That's an excellent question. And one of the reasons that we're waiting until the fall, because the structure of that approval and adoption process is one of the things that's currently being negotiated through that plan governance study and the interlocal agreements. And currently, if nothing changed, it would be Orange County, DCHC MPO, and Go Triangle. That's the existing structure. So it would be similar with, I know that there's discussion of perhaps giving Chapel Hill Transit and Chapel Hill a vote, potentially maybe the other municipalities, but I will say that that is a work in progress for sure. But we'll make sure that folks from the county keep you all updated on that process.
Okay, and which group again is negotiating that?
Let's see. So it's Orange County, Durham County, DCHC MPO, Go Triangle, and then I think as it stands, there's also, I mean, Brian, I know you don't all have a technical vote, right? But you do weigh in on these items. Is that true?
Yeah, we could take a whole work session to talk about this, but what Carolyn has shared is basically the nuts and bolts of it. So the signatories to the agreement are the MPO, Orange County, and Go Triangle. While there's a discussion about should Chapel Hill have and perhaps other entities have votes on the staff working group level, I would. Well, I may not bet my entire next year's salary on it. I would probably bet several paychecks that will not change when that is adopted, and that the county, the MPO, and Go Triangle would be the signatories and the adopting agencies. Very similar to what happens in Durham and in Wake County, but it's likely. And what we and others have been advocating for is to allow us to have a vote on the staff working group, which, while doesn't adopt the plan, certainly makes recommendations to the plan and recommendations on how money is allocated on an annual basis.
Okay, yeah, I mean, I just, it feels like this is our transit system, and it feels odd that we have such a diluted kind of input and vote on this. So hoping long-term that can change for us.
Amen. We concur with that. I think the other folks that have votes in that have different views on that as a result of their interest. But I think that's certainly something that is you can share with Michael and others that are part of the policy steering committee, and perhaps maybe part of those discussions in the future as well too.
Michael, consider it shared.
Oh, you're on mute, Michael.
Yeah, you also need to have a conversation with our state legislature because a lot of the governance stuff was included in the enabling legislation.
Yep. No, I hear you. It's just if we have a goal that we're working toward.
The first goal we're working toward is more money.
That can't be our only goal. But anyway, thank you very much.
I'm sorry, I forget after all that discussion, someone else had their hand, Mr. Steven.
I'll talk just a little bit more about the 15501 corridor and long range plans. I know you talked about the 400 and the 405, doing that and a couple of the other services. And then we've got the BRT, thinking about that, but that, there are huge hurdles with that, with funding and stuff, and congestion keeps going up. And I mean, I know we are limited in many ways, but something I hear a lot about. So.
Yes, and I think that's a fantastic question, and definitely something that we spent quite a bit of time discussing with the policy steering committee as well. So yes, you're right. So the biggest issue is that there is a lack of funding. I think there is very much a desire to have something more, a more enhanced transit service on that corridor. It's certainly needed. What we're trying to do with our plan is to put service improvements in place that will incrementally move towards that goal, while also setting you all up as best as possible to take the immediate next steps that would need to be taken to start thinking about moving into those pipelines for the federal funding that would be needed for that type of project. So I don't know everyone's, level of understanding of how the federal FTA grant programs work, but it is a pretty long timeline. And typically it starts with something like an alternatives analysis, right? And you're really just starting to look at options. Brian could walk you through the process that, they've gone through for the NSBRT. You start with some reports, you get accepted into the funding program, and then there's all these checkpoints along the way. The best advice that I could give you is to ensure that your land use is supportive of transit in that corridor, because one of the things that they're going to look at, and one of the ways you can be most competitive when you're trying to fund those projects, is to have, the ridership that can support that type of transit service. And if you're looking at those two, separately, it becomes very difficult to move towards a common goal. And figuring out, ways to make that corridor more rider friendly is, I think, a great first step, while we're also making improvements in the service that exists where we can. And also working with the MPO. I think there's a real opportunity here too to Ms. Ryan's point, come at this from a regional perspective, right? This is an area where everybody is very dependent on each other. We move back and forth a lot, in and out of counties. And I think taking a regional approach does a couple things. One, it allows you to build in efficiencies to use your limited resources more effectively. And also, the federal funds are a limited pot of money. And if everybody's fighting for them, like within this one little region, it doesn't really serve anyone well, right? Especially when you have Raleigh down the road, who's also trying to get that funding, and Charlotte a few hours away, who's also doing the same thing, and Richmond a little bit north, right? So, having that united effort of planning and pooling your resources and moving towards that common goal, I think would, I think it could get you further than sort of trying to do this piecemeal, one at a time.
Okay. This item is open for public comment. If there's anyone wishing to speak on this item, we welcome your comments. I know some people have hung with us for a bit to hear this item. So, okay, I bring it back to council for comments at this point. And I actually want to take a moment to say thank you to Mr. Parker for being our representative on this group. I started out, but it became clear it was just too hard to work my schedule around the meetings, and he's our knowledgeable transit expert serving on Go Triangle, Transit Partners, MPO, all kinds of things. So thank you for your work. It was a lot of work in the beginning to get us better coordinated as a county and to make those conversations and collaboration with Durham County a much more positive experience by working through Chapel Hill Transit. And Brian's been at the table. We've been trying to get a vote on the technical committee as well for Chapel Hill Transit, but the meetings progressed much more smoothly and cooperatively once we got a little bit more reorganized, I will say. And that came from pressure from us sticking to our values. So thank you. All right, council comments. Mr. Parker.
So just a couple of things. First, I want to thank Caroline and the team for hanging in there. As the mayor alluded to, this got off to a bit of a rocky start, shall we say, but I think it came out into a good place. That said, the challenge, and I don't want to, and I wasn't trying to make light of it earlier. Chapel Hill or Orange County, however you want to look at it, has a unique challenge in that our transit needs, because we're such a big employment center, and we've seen some of that data as related to our housing study, but we are a very large employment center. We've seen the data north of 40,000 people come into Chapel Hill every day. We have really significant and serious needs for transit. And the way it's funded, our tax base just simply doesn't support the level of transit that our residents and that our town and to a lesser extent our county need. I mean, just to give some comparison, our half-cent sales tax right now generates a little bit over $9.5 million a year, which, just to give you an example, is, roughly a third of Chapel Hill Transit's operating budget. You look at, Wake County, for example, and their half-cent sales tax yields for them over $100 million a year, and they are currently, unless something has happened, they're currently sitting on about $350 million in the bank. And Durham, generates about $40 million a year, and I think they're sitting on about $40 or $50 million in the bank. We ain't got no bank. And so, until and unless we can find other sources of funding, wherever those may be, whether it's more money from state appropriations authority, if folks wanted to increase the sales tax, other means, we are always going to be strapped in terms of transit. We just simply do not have the resources to provide the transit that we need. And, we're experiencing that now with, for example, the North-South BRT and the challenges that we're having getting the money for that. You look at Wake County, they already have one BRT with a full funding agreement from the federal government that's moving ahead. They've got 3 more on the drawing board, and for none of them are they requesting state funds. I mean, they're asking for state funds, but they don't need them, and they can just move ahead without them. So, I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer or anything like that, but the reality is, when we look at the various projects that are in this plan, it's as good as we can get. I personally was disappointed that we couldn't do more, but the numbers are numbers. The good news is, as Caroline alluded to, this plan is required to be updated every 4 or 5 years, and hopefully things may change for the better. Maybe they won't. And so in 4 or 5 years, we can relook at these things. So even though this plan extends out to 2030, 2040, it's in many ways a 5-year plan. And so, I have hope that perhaps the next iteration will figure out ways to do a better job for our residents.
Okay, Ms. Berry.
Yes, my curiosity about the electric vans came from my trip as the representative of this council to South Florida, where I traveled with 83 other folks from this region, 0 from Orange County. I was the only one from Orange County who was able to go on this trip that was rescheduled. And it was incredible to witness what was achieved through regional teamwork. They really worked together, and we were based in Fort Lauderdale. Went to Miami the first day, the first full day, and then to West Palm Beach the second. And of course, we explored Fort Lauderdale. So back to what you said, Caroline, of pulling efforts and working as a region, I support that too. And it was very evident that's how they were successful. Another point I want to make that I learned on that trip was it wasn't just the governments that made this possible, that regional transit. It was partnerships with private industries as well. So thank you.
Okay. I don't think we have to make a motion on this item. Is that correct? Okay. Thank you for giving us, for all the hard work, first off. Thank you for, and for hanging in there with us as we righted the ship a little bit better. And we look forward to hearing more, and we look forward to a cooperative plan, especially with our partners in Durham. And the MPO is very interested in this as well, because we know we have to take a regional approach, as we know populations in the region live and work and cross each other all the time. So we need to figure a better system out. So we appreciate that. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, I have some announcements of some appointments on the Environmental Sustainability Board. The council has appointed Lucy Vanderkamp as the Greenways Advocate and Stefan Klakovich as the Stormwater Advocate. We didn't make a selection because we had a little confusion with the ballot on the rest of the appointments. So please stay tuned for a further meeting when we can bring that, we can reduce that confusion and come back to you. We really appreciate people applying for our boards. We're looking to get more people involved, but there was, like I said, a little confusion on the ballot filling out this time, and we will get that straightened out. On the grievance hearing board, the council reappointed Howard Callum and Leilani, I'm sorry, my handwriting's terrible, Kumfov, and appointed Maria Chapa as our new person there. And for the planning commission, the council appointed Chuck Mills. So thank you again for everyone who applied. We're still making appointments. We're still going through all the applications. So you'll see a lot more appointments coming forward. So please hang in there. And if you haven't applied and are interested, we welcome you to apply. We appreciate that. Council, friendly reminder, we have a meeting at 8 o'clock on Friday morning, and we will be virtual. So that is the end of our agenda for this evening. So meeting's adjourned. Good job.
Night, everyone.